FBI's former #1 most wanted Brett Johnson joined me today. This was one of my favorite episodes for many reasons. I think people spend too much time avoiding the criminal element when there is so much to be gained by talking to them. We only got to a little less than half of what I wanted to discuss with him, but I think you can tell that this is a bit of a roller coaster, talking about his background and his life leading him into a life of crime and eventually prison. This was as much a therapy session as it was an interview. So we'll have to have him back at some point because I really don't want to arbitrarily end a conversation when there's so much left to discuss. But for now, please enjoy this trip to the other side with Brett Johnson. Okay, so before I get started, there's this thing. I don't know if you've seen this. ISSA and CISSP, they're like, you can't associate with hackers if you want to have your CISSP.
Right.
Have you seen this?
I have seen that. They're full of shit.
They're full of shit. And I would just like to get your take on it, and then I'll give you my take. Go ahead.
Okay. So my take, you don't want to associate with hackers. Right. First of all, what is a hacker? That would be the first question.
Yeah, start
because
there.
I don't refer to myself as a hacker. I'm a cyber criminal. I'm a fraudster is what I am.
That's fine, I guess.
All right. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it pays the bills even today. But this whole idea of we can't have you associating with someone. So you're going to deny yourself this area of knowledge and insight, which may help you do your job in the future. Mm-hmm. There's something wrong with that. That's my opinion on that. I think they're full of shit.
Oh, I do too. So I am no longer a CISSP, and there was a bunch of reasons for it. But this is one of those kind of underlying things that it never worked for me. And I used to run hackers.org, which is very funny because I'm like, I don't associate with one. I am one. So I don't really care. But no one ever stopped me. So clearly that's not a hard and fast rule. And it also made no sense. But I remember talking to this one guy this one time about Mitnick, RIP. And so Kevin Mitnick, for those who don't have any clue who that is, committed some amount of crime. This is like 2-3 decades back. This is quite a while ago now. But even at that point, it was probably still 15 years before the things went down and he got busted and whatever. And he's running a company and successful. And, they're like, well, I would never hang out with him. I'd never associate with him because he's a criminal. I'm like, what? But like, how do you know how criminals work if you don't talk to them?
Right.
It's like a FBI agent or a police officer never talking to informants or talking to guys in the street who look like they're hanging around a little bit too much near that place, like very frequently handing things to people and taking things from people. You might want to go talk to them and figure out what's going on over there.
It's interesting. I forgot the company I was working with. It was an event company when I first got started speaking. Mm-hmm. And
how's that going? Speaking.
Yeah, it sucks, right? But what happens is this lady was up there. She was talking about synthetic identity fraud, and she was giving all the statistics and all the how their company was mitigating the problem and everything else like that. And it occurred to me about 30 minutes into her presentation, she had no idea how the fraud was committed at all. Not a clue. All right. So I get up right after her and I start walking through it. This is how it's set up. This is how it's done. This is how they profit by it. Bam, 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 bam. And the look on people's faces when you actually walk them through how those things are committed, when they don't have a clue about it, that's why you need to talk to these people. Mm-hmm. The first conference I ever gave was an academic conference. So these kids were up there going through their PhDs and all that. Guy's in from Hong Kong, and he's talking about fraud in Hong Kong. Raise my hand at the end of the presentation. What would you call the largest type of fraud in Hong Kong? Couldn't answer it. I'm like, seriously? Could not answer it. And what I see even today, education to real world, there's this huge disconnect. And if you're not talking to the people that's on the ground, that's committing these crimes, understanding how it's done, why it's done, everything else, you've got a problem.
So if I were to guess, surf fraud or whatever the I think there's another word for it, but basically it's filing people's taxes on their behalf, and that my current understanding that's around a $4 billion a year crime, just that one, not
Right.
having anything to do with the rest of them. I think that's the biggest one I'm currently aware of. Is that the biggest? Fraud.
So,
I mean, there's obviously things like phishing.
There's other
and
types.
there's
So
other things that get
take
money.
synthetic fraud, for example. That's a $50 billion a year industry.
50.
So it's 20% of all credit card chargebacks. It's 5% of all overall credit card debt. It's 80% of all new account fraud, fastest growing form of identity theft on the planet. Now, that is income tax return identity theft comparable to that? Probably.
Well, so this is 4 billion was about, I'm going to guess maybe it's probably longer. Probably about 10 years back that I have those numbers. So it could have gone up. I don't know if it got up to 50 though.
Up.
That seems like.
Well, I'm the guy that started that tax return crap.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, I know. Right? Yeah, nothing to be proud of. But what's weird, so I started that bullshit back in 2002, 2003. All right. And I would file typically 80 to 100 returns a week. Returns would be in the $3,500 range. 80
to 100. So I'm doing that math. So around 10 a day approximately.
Well, I would file from Sunday through Wednesday.
Okay.
Got to where I was able to manually file one every 6 minutes.
Why those days?
Thursday would take a road trip, plot out a map of ATMs. Friday, Saturday, cash out prepaid debit cards that those returns were loaded onto. All right, $150,000 cash in 20s fits into a college backpack. I was living in Charleston, South Carolina at that point in time. Had a spare bedroom, come home with a backpack full of $150K, chuck it in the bedroom. And then one day you wake up and you're like, got to do something with all those fucking backpacks. Mm-hmm. And that's when you learn how to launder money.
So there's many different ways to launder money. I've actually seen probably 10, 15 different presentations on this. Never personally laundered money. But one of the ways I've always been convinced should be the way to do it is online porn, especially affiliate related porn, because there's kind of like money on top of money. So you're like, I'm going to pay an affiliate, but they don't collect the check, so it's just a bad payment. So the money that would have gone to the affiliate actually just ends up being like uncollectible, unpayable monies, and it all gets kind of routed through a legitimate porn site, prove that the traffic wasn't real.
Right.
And it just seems like that would be extremely easy to make that all work if you had if you could hand someone a large chunk of cash and have them, piecemeal it out into a bunch of different synthetic identities, as you say, and just buy all they do is buy stuff off porn sites all day, and it gets routed. And you don't have to look at the porn, but they do have to purchase.
Well, why not?
You could also look at the porn, but my point is they could just funnel it all through, and it seems like the way to do it.
I think that would be a very good way to do it.
Yeah,
okay. I really do.
What are the current sort of industry standard ways to do it right these days?
So, I mean, you can still do the affiliate. Absolutely. That happens every single day. You've got people that are setting up Shopify accounts, what have you like that. You've got the money-based businesses. You've got OnlyFans. That's a good one. You've got NFTs if they ever come back into play again. That was a huge one at that point in time. Mm-hmm. So you've got all different kinds of things. When I was doing it, it was brick and mortar businesses. I had an advertising company, had a stage production company, a couple of food trucks, things like that, and would launder it like that.
Gotcha. I remember I broke into this one thing, and I had basically all the money in the world going through like these centralized systems, like the banks fulfill at the end of the day, and they have to put it all in singular places for these big processors. Anyway, I had access to it, like all of it, and I could change where I put all the money. It's all like right there. It's all. And I actually thought it was something called an off by one error, because sometimes like it's usually just a visual problem. Like the decimal place will be like in the wrong place.
Sure.
But it's just a UI problem. It's not really the data is like that. So I'm like, this can't be right. But then I started doing the math, and I'm like, holy shit, it's right. I have so much money. And so I was talking to one of my bad guy buddies.
One of my bad guy buddies.
You know how it is. And I'm like, okay, so let's say I wanted to move like an enormous amount of money. He's like, well, how much do you want to move? I'm like, I don't know, like $1.5 trillion. He's like,
that's a lot of money.
He's like, no, Robert, I cannot help you. He's like, if you say like $15 million, it'd be like, maybe. I'm like, okay, what if I want to do that like 1,000 times? He's like, no, Robert. Like, no, you cannot, no. And so then he's like, okay, well, you can set up these Panamanian fall guys. So they'll have a bank, and it'll be like one guy, and he gets like $1 million to do it. He'll just like pretend like, he stole a bunch of money from the bank,
right?
But he basically gives you $14 million back for your 15. but it all looks legitimate. And so, yeah, I mean, there was another way to do it through some kind of calling system in India. They had some sort of prepaid system where you could call in and sort of route money through it, but you had, but it was like,
bad.
it was like, but it was small dollars. It was like $100 at a time. I'm like,
no,
yeah, that's not
forever.
Work. That's not going to work, my friend. Okay. So now that we've cleared the air here, no, I really think it's super helpful to be talking to people about this. I'll give you another example just so we're not on the same page about this. So a buddy of mine, I don't know if I call him a buddy, a guy I know somewhat well who eventually threatened to kill me. So
Doesn't sound like a buddy.
So, well, I mean, at the time, that's what I'm saying. It's kind of hard to say like what I currently feel about him now, but at the time we were friendly, and I started asking him questions about different types of exploits. Like, okay, what do you think about this exploit? What do you think about this exploit? And we're going through, and some of the brand new exploits that are out there, he's like, I don't know anything about that. I'm like, but this is like all the rage. All these security researchers are working on it. They're all excited about it, like XML entities injection and blah, 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 and like all this stuff. And he's like, I don't know anyone who's ever used that. I've never even heard the words before you just said them today. And I'm like, that is very eye-opening. Like, wow, we are stupid in our industry. We are so divorced from what's really happening that it spiraled me into thinking about things like insurance and all these, like, where does the real breach loss go? I don't really care about breaches. Where's the loss come from? Who's losing money? Where are the incentives? And it made me a much better security person.
Oh, I bet.
So I like talking to hackers and internet fraudsters,
you learn things.
or whatever you want to call yourself. Baddie. I don't know. Baddie. Okay. Well, I think most people, excuse me, are going to be curious about how you got started. So how about we start from the beginning?
How far back you want to go?
You were born and then. Or earlier. All right. Whatever it takes.
Wow, man. Okay, we'll start at the beginning. I'm from Eastern Kentucky. So Hazard, Kentucky, as a matter of fact. Hazard is...
as in Dukes of?
As in Dukes of. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, we had this... the county judge was a guy named Carol Fugit was his name, and he had been in the National Enquirer several times because he owned a white Cadillac. He dressed in a white suit, and he called himself Boss Hog. No shit. We had this festival called the Black Gold Festival every September.
Wait, which came first? I gotta know.
Oh, the Dukes of Hazzard came first. He was just a big fan. He just decided he wanted to do that shit. Yeah, and he got so deep into it that he would hire the Dukes and Hazzard cast to come in for the fall festival.
Wow.
Yeah, he really liked it, and of course he gets indicted later on for fraud. Obviously. But so I'm from Hazard, Kentucky. It's in the heart of coal country, very small town, very cliquey type of town. My mom was a fraudster. My mom is still alive. She's not a good person. I love my mom, but she is not a good person. What happens is I get the worst parts from my mom and my dad. My dad was in the military. He was a captain in the Army. The way he tells the story, he was dating this woman. Her name was Brenda Brashear. He was dating her, and she breaks up with him, just kind of, on a whim. They were supposed to get married and everything else. She breaks up with him. He meets my mom like a month later. She fucks his brains out. He decides he's in love with her. He gets her ass pregnant with this guy, right? So he gets her ass pregnant with me. He came from a really good family. His dad was a tax commissioner for the county. His mom was a chef at the main hotel in the county and everything else. So he goes and tells his mom, I'm going to marry Carolyn, my mom. His mom literally passes out in the floor right there, all right? Tells his dad just kind of shakes his head. So my mom and my dad, they decide to elope. That's what they do. So my dad passed away in October, but the way my dad tells the story is when he goes to marry my mom, he pulls up to the house. Her dad is sitting out on the front porch in a swing. Dad walks up and he's like, Ray Jean, come here and sit down. So my dad sits down next to him. He's like, Ray, if you knew what I knew, you'd take off running and you'd never look back. Well, of course, my dad doesn't listen to that advice.
Wow.
Marries my mom. My mom, I don't know if you'd call her manic. I don't know what exactly is wrong with her. I know she's got a lot of problems. So she was a woman that she cheated on my dad religiously. She would bring men home in front of my dad. My dad was I get these comments these days online calling him a cuck, and he was. He didn't have much of a backbone at all. He was scared that if he would stand up to her that she would leave. He didn't want her to leave. That and the abuse. He came from a good family, and I don't think that he knew how to handle the abuse once he got involved with that. But she'd bring men home in front of him. He'd sit there and cry, beg her not to do it. She'd do it anyway.
Why do you think?
Why would he do that?
No, why would she do that?
Mom is somebody that tests love, is what she does. She wants to know, can I do this to you, and you'll still love me at the end of the day? That's my mom. And she did that to all of us. When I talk in presentations and stuff, I mention it to a degree, but she was a very abusive parent. Physically, she was abusive until my sister decided she wasn't going to take it anymore and kicks my mom through a closet and tells her, hey, you're done touching us. But my mom excelled with the verbal and the mental and just the negligence of everything. So she would, goddamn, she'd tell us all the time that, she gave up her life for us, that she was going to leave and not come back, that we'd find her dead in a ditch someplace. That was a common thing with her. My dad at one point, my dad gets enough of a backbone that he files for divorce. I was probably 8 or 9 years old. My dad files for divorce, and in Kentucky, the way it works is the son goes with the dad, and the daughter goes with the mom. So I was staying with my dad. We had an apartment. My sister was staying with my mom. The apartment me and my dad had was a one-bedroom. I slept in the bed. My dad slept in the living room on the sofa. So one night I'm asleep, and I hear this, tussle, ruckus in the living room, and wake up and walk in the living room. My dad's laying on the couch. My mom is in the living room. She's got a knife to my dad's throat, threatening to kill him because he's taking her son. And of course, she sees my face at that point. And what she was always good about doing is when she got caught doing something, she would always go to the next level to try to detract attention from her wrongdoing. So what she does is at that point she gets up, runs to the bathroom. We didn't have any. We had just safety razors, the big safety razors. So she gets one of these safety razors and tries to act like she's cutting her wrist with a safety razor, starts screaming and crying and everything like that. And so, of course, my dad, the savior, has to go in and forgets all about her trying to kill him and just tries to rescue her at that point. That was my mom. That is my mom. There was a point where...
What do you think her background would be that would get her to that place? You don't just start there.
You don't. That whole side of the family was really screwed up. The way my mom told it was when my grandmother Alverna had her, Alverna brings her to the house, hands her to her dad Paul. Paul holds my mom and just drops her on the floor. I don't want this fucking baby, is the way my mom told it. And growing up in that environment, my mom had one sister, and my mom was not the favorite at all. But that entire family was very abusive. Paul had diabetes, and he didn't treat his diabetes right, so he always had really high sugar. And when he got really high sugar, the guy would go fucking nuts. And it was not uncommon that he would chase you around the house with a knife or with a hose or something like that. And it was very easy to piss the man off. He had a house. He lived in a neighborhood, and we lived with him for a while. But he had elevated his house and built apartments underneath the house, and he rented those apartments out. Well, if any of the renters made any noises at all after 11 o'clock at night, the master switch was upstairs, so he just kicked the power right there, and that was it. And he would scream out at him, "You dogs can just sleep in the dark tonight," and that was him. I mean, he was just completely fucking crazy. I remember There was one Christmas that my grandmother, she was decorating a Christmas tree, and she's bent over decorating the tree. Paul is in the living room watching her. He gets up. He was wearing these steel-toed boots. Just kicks her in the ass as hard as he can. Puts her in the hospital for a week for that. And this is where this environment's come from. So
Wow.
you're wondering why my mom was acting like that. She grew up in that. And so what happens is...
System perpetuates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the weird thing about that, Robert. Now, we were on the extreme. That family's on the extreme. But you hear stories like this frequently in eastern Kentucky. That idea of the abuse, of that cycle recurring over and over again. And eastern Kentucky it's very poor. You know, you're lucky to get a job. A lot of people can't get a job, so you get a lot of that hustle type of economy that's going around. You get people that are dealing drugs. You get people that are stealing out of Lowe's or Home Depot or what have you. You get that type of theft type of economy. As a matter of fact, the New York Times back in the early 80s wrote an article about Perry County, that's the county, about the economy being based on a flea market. That it was basically this flea market type of economy. It's a really poor area. So if you're lucky enough to have a job, you're good to go. If you're not, you may be involved in a scam, hustle, fraud, what have you. And my mom, she was a nurse, but my mom's problem was she didn't want to work. So she gravitated toward the scams and the frauds and the hustles and all of that. And I didn't know that initially growing up. And what happens is my dad, we had, like I said, my dad was the guy who was never motivated, ever. You know, he'd get a job and he'd keep his job, but he never really was motivated to excel at anything. And my mom wore his ass out because of that. She would just abuse him, just bam, 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 always just be on his ass about it. And there were 2 times that my dad kind of got motivated. The first, you know, he was a captain in the military, helicopter pilot. They downsized and they offered him, they said, hey, you can stay in the military. We're going to bust your ass down to a staff sergeant, or you can leave. Well, he leaves and decides he's going to be a coal miner because back then coal was booming and the prices were pretty good for hires and everything.
Sure.
But he found out pretty quickly that they were on strike more than they were working. So we were on food stamps a lot. He was on unemployment a lot, you know, trying to make ends meet. When he was in the military, he made really good money. We lived in Germany for over 3 years. We toured Germany, and they bought all this handmade furniture and crystal and all this other bullshit. So when they're going broke, they're selling it all because they don't have money to make ends meet. You know, so he gets this idea that he wants to fly drugs back and forth across the Mexican-Texas border, and he knew somebody that was in what was called the Cornbread Mafia at that point in time. His name was Tommy Allen Combs, was this guy's name. And so my dad starts talking to him, and Tommy loved the guy, absolutely loved him. And I guess he gets permission to do that. Everything's greenlit. And where that falls apart, Tommy had served prison time, had not snitched on anybody. So he gets out. Law enforcement had a hard-on for the guy. One day, the county sheriff, a guy named Pearl Couch, calls Tommy up, and he's like, Tommy, we got a warrant for you. Come on in. And Tommy's like, nah, why don't you come and get me? And Pearl's like, okay, we'll send someone down to get you. So they send a state trooper and a sheriff's officer. He kills the trooper, puts the sheriff's officer in a wheelchair for life. And then a 6-hour shootout ensues, and they kill Tommy Allen. Well, that kind of dispelled my dad's notion of, you know, wanting to fly drugs. So that was the first idea that he had. And the second idea, this would probably been a year after that. Dad's watching 60 Minutes, and they had a show on the Miami drug trafficking scene down there, and they showing the tables of cash, the pallets of coke and everything. And my dad's locked into it. My mom's watching my dad watch the show. He gets through watching the segment. My dad looks at my mom. I think I need to go down and be a cop. My mom's like, I think you need to be a cop. And the idea was get down there, find a drug deal, let them keep the drugs, he'll keep the cash. And I was like, they'll shoot your ass. And he was like, oh, it'll be fine. So they sell everything they got, round up about $6,000 in cash, put the rest in a U-Haul, head south on I-75, get down there right as some Miami riots are breaking out. And he goes to cop class the first day, comes back. It's going to be good. Goes to cop class the next day, comes back, we got to leave this fucking place, because what happens is Miami-Dade cops burst in, arrest like 6 people that had outstanding warrants with the same idea that he had. And he was like, no, we need to leave. So they're broke at this point. Get back in the U-Haul, head north on I-75, and they just happened to remember that, hey, we spent spring break in Panama City, Florida. So we ended up in Panama City. The only job he could get was a 7-Eleven as a midnight clerk. $140 a week is what he got. My mom starts working at a nursing home, keeps a job long enough to see him off to work, quits the job, starts cheating on him. And what happens is he was always scared she was going to leave, and she does leave him. But I remember we used to get the power cut off or the water cut off. And like the water would be cut off, and we'd wait until dark when it would rain, and we'd be out in the damn driveway catching water in pots and pans and stuff to be able to brush your teeth or take a sponge bath or something like that. But they were going broke, absolutely going broke. My mom decides she's going to leave my dad. She doesn't tell anybody. My grandfather had died. She tells me and my sister, I was about 10. My sister Denise was 9. She tells us that we're going up to the funeral. She doesn't tell that, we're not coming back. So she packs all of her clothes in the car. My dad, I guess my dad probably knew what was going on. I don't know. But she leaves him. And we moved to Eastern Kentucky and lived with my grandparents. That crazy Paul Campbell is who we lived with. And we ended up getting an apartment down underneath of him. And where my life of crime begins, my mom used to leave me and my sister home for days at a time. And she'd go out partying. But what happens is we didn't want to go upstairs to ask for food because they would, ride our asses about it. Your mom's worthless, we're tired of feeding you kids, blah, blah, blah. And not only that, but like we were allowed to take like 1 bath a week. And Paul, we were allowed 2 inches of water. That's what we were allowed. That was it, And so what happens is his mom had been gone for a few days, and Denise walks in one day, and she's got this pack of pork chops in her hand. And I'm like, where'd you get that? She's like, I stole it. And I'm like, shit, show me how you did that. So she takes me over, and Denise is stuffing food down her pants is how she's doing it. And so we start stealing food, and we get to the point where we're wanting a sandwich. Well, you can't stuff that loaf of bread down your pants, Mm-hmm. Well, the shopping plaza, it was an A&P we were stealing from, and at the top of the plaza, there was a Kmart there. And I told my sister, I was like, let me see what I can do. I walked in and got one of those zip-up hoodies off the rack, took the tags off of it, put it on, wore it out, got outside with it. And the way you steal bread when you're 10 years old is you take that hoodie off, you take the loaf of bread, stuff it down the sleeve of the jacket, just throw it over top your shoulder, and go with it. And turns out, Kmart's got a hell of a lot more than hoodies. So we started stealing, toys and video games and everything that we possibly could. Mom, after a while, she notices the stuff we've been stealing.
When did she notice?
Oh, shit, it took her 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks, because she was too busy partying. So she notices, where'd this shit come from? And I'm the guy, we found it. No, you didn't find that shit.
Someone just put it in here.
Yeah, found it. We found it. Well, what happened was, so from Airport Gardens, where we lived at, to get to Kmart, you had to walk through kind of a swampy area to get to that. And I told her, I was like, somebody had dumped it over there. It's like, no, nobody dumped that bullshit over there, because I had a new Intellivision and Atari 2600 and all this other crap. And Denise stands up. We stole it. My mom showed me how you did that. And she starts running this as little shoplifters, calls her mom too, so to join us. And we take these road trips. They go to JCPenney's and steal clothes and jewelry, stuff like that. And they'd use us as, distractions. Who's going to shoplift when you've got 2 kids with you? Nobody is, right?
Right.
So they got caught. We were at Bristol, Tennessee. Bristol or Kingsport, one of those 2 areas. It's Fort Thomas Mall was the name of the mall. So the idea was the 3 of them, they were going into JCPenney's to steal clothes. And I always went to the bookstores. B. Dalton was the bookstore at that place. I always went to the bookstore, still books. And so the deal was we were supposed to meet back at the vehicle like at 1 o'clock, some bullshit like that. So I steal my books, come back to the Blazer, and nobody's there. I'm like, what the fuck? So I'm standing there, 10-year-old kid standing there like, what the hell?
So you had something to read?
Yeah, I had something to read. The doors were locked, so I couldn't. What am I going to do with the books? And I knew they were in JCPenney, so I try to hide the books underneath the Blazer. Walk into JCPenney's, and as I'm walking in, there's these 2 security guards in the foyer there, and I hear my name come over top of their walkie-talkie, Brett Johnson. And so I stopped, and I'm like, that's me. They're like, you're Brett Johnson? I'm like, yeah. So they're like, come with me. So they take me to the security room, and my mom and grandmother are huddled in a corner, hugging each other, crying. We've never done this before. We didn't mean to do it. Oh, please let us go. Please let us go. My sister, pissed off to beat all hell. She's as far away from them as she can get, just looking at them like she can fucking kill them right there. They let her go. They charge them, but because they had 2 kids with them, they didn't know what to do with the kids. So they went ahead and charged them, gave them a court date. We go back home. That ended their little shoplifting career at that point. Didn't end my shoplifting
How long
career.
did that last, that period?
8 months, 9.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, enough to get some experience.
Run.
Yeah, it was a good run. It was a good run. But that was the first thing. But it wasn't just shoplifting with them. You see these people beside the road that collect money in buckets. We did that bullshit, for homeless kids, for abused shelters, that kind of stuff. We did that. I grew up knowing how to doing all that stuff. Grew up knowing how to do document fraud, insurance fraud, so faking stolen cars, burning cars, accidents, burning homes for cash, breaking and entering, trafficking drugs. The charity fraud did that. Got older and they started wildcatting coal, so had some experience with illegally strip mining coal. It was that was fucked up, but did that until finally and grew up in that type of environment and found out pretty quickly it wasn't just my mom, it was everybody.
So yes, but that's a lot of different kinds of crime. So is the reason you kept shifting is just it wasn't profitable enough, or you'd get caught, or what? Why the shifts?
My mom was the person that would try anything. So this is a woman who, she steals a D9 bulldozer at one point. She takes a slip and fall convenience store at another point. We had a neighbor she acted as a pimp for at one point. At another point, she goes to, Revco was the name. Revco before they turned into CVS. She goes to Revco, buys capsules and diet pills and loads the capsules up trying to sell them as speed. This kind of bullshit. And mom was the person that would always, she was very opportunistic. So very little planning, but if an opportunity presented itself, she'd give it a run.
But a lot of those that's quite a bit of work. I mean,
it's a lot of work.
Like the strip mining thing, for instance, that's an enormous amount of work. And if you're successful, theoretically, you'd go for a while,
right?
Which just basically puts you back at being a coal miner again.
Right.
Like, why go through all the extra steps?
So like wildcatting coal, strip mining, all right? And I get this. So I was on Lex Friedman, and I made the statement, it's a 36-inch block of coal. Is what I said. Well, it's actually 39 inches by 39 inches will give you a ton of coal, all right? When you're talking about wildcatting, what you're actually talking about is you're talking about strip mining coal without a permit is what you're talking about, all right? So back then you'd get a 2-acre permit. That permit would run you anywhere from $3,500 to about $7,000, and that was to guarantee that you would reclaim the land after you got through stripping it,
right?
Which cost a lot of money at that point, all right? They didn't want to do that. They didn't have the money for the bond for the permit anyway. So the way you do that is you get up with the landowner and you say, I'll give you so much per ton that comes out of the ground. And they agree with that. Then you go to a coal tipple and you say, hey, I've got this coal to buy, and typically to sell, and they will say, well, what's the BTU on it? So then you have to take a sample down, get the BTU tested, come back at 28.5, whatever.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is so much work.
It's a lot of work.
This is a lot of work.
But, I mean, how else are you going to make money at that point? And understand what we're talking about is we're talking about simply stripping the land, stripping coal without the permit. Mm-hmm. And that way you don't have to reclaim. That's the illegal part of that.
Right, sure.
Of course, you've got the laundering money part and everything else too, but the main part is the friggin' permit. That's where it starts at, all right?
And some would argue that shouldn't, it's your land, you should be able to do whatever you want with it.
Some would argue that.
But regardless of the ethics here, it's just a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
That's the part that has always kind of surprised me is a lot of these cons, man, there's just the amount of setup work just to get them up and running. And then you have all the maintenance of protecting yourself and making sure you don't get caught. And then you have the sort of tear down, which is the laundering and all that other stuff, assuming you get rid of it, or you just kind of keep going. And that is a lot of work.
Well, I mean, that's a secret of crime, right? As people think that crime's easy, that, it's you're not doing anything. But the truth is you work your ass off committing crime. I don't really care what the crime is. You're working your ass off.
If you want to be any good at it.
Right. And it's just the upper tier guys that are making a lot of money. Right. The little bitty groundlings, no, they don't make shit.
Right.
You have to put your dues in to make money.
Okay. So, sorry, that was a bit of an aside, but no. I really need to highlight that because I've known a lot of people who've been kind of on the fence, maybe done onesie twosie little things that are bad and came back, but mostly because they're like, it just didn't work. And what they're not saying is that they didn't make money, but they're like, in terms of dollars in versus dollars out, like, man, I could literally just work a part-time job and I would have made as much money.
You would, yeah. Until you reach that expert level.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Yeah. You'd have to, but all these little scams, just getting started, just trying one thing out, and they're like, wow, never going to do that again. Right. What a waste, and also dangerous. And they're always looking over their shoulder. And
well, this comes into that thing. That's one of the things I think that a lot of people, unless you've committed crime, you really don't understand that crime is not a job. There's a reason it's called a criminal lifestyle. It's 24/7, 365 days a year. This is something that's constant. You mentioned it just a second ago, that fear of a knock on a door, avoiding law enforcement, making sure if you're online, your operational security is good. It's something that consumes you that is not a 9-to-5 job. There's a reason that you get all these fraud analysts and all that they're on this losing end of the battle. And it's because, hey, for me, that's a lifestyle. That's me. It's more than a career. That's my life. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Okay, I didn't mean to derail you.
No,
so
you're fine.
So you were doing all of these different kinds of onesie twosie things. It might have lasted a while, but okay, so then what happens?
I fake a car accident to get the money to get married.
Okay, well, how did you meet her?
So
the lovely bride.
Well, what happens is oh shit, there's a whole lot to go through, man.
Oh, yeah. All right, do what you need to do.
So I was I have to mention this because it's wrong for me not to, and I insist on talking about this every time. Me and my sister went through a lot of abuse. Okay. And my sister, I was very fortunate. I was a few years ago, I got to sit down with my sister and do some recordings. And she said she always thought that someone was going to come and save us. And I responded almost immediately that I knew that no one ever was. And Denise, she goes on to tell me how she had tried to commit suicide when she was, a very young teenager. I didn't try to commit suicide. What happened with me is I get to the point, and again, I was 9, 11 years old, something like that. But I would catch my mom and dad gone, and I would urinate in the house like an animal, just piss the carpet. And I didn't talk about that. Didn't know why I did that. But didn't talk about it until I was about 48, 49 years old. And I was on a stage doing this legal thing of mine these days, on a stage, and mentioned it, just let it flow. And after that, a woman came up to me and she was like, before I got into cybersecurity, I used to work with abused kids, and that shit's normal. And she tells me that that was the only form of control that I had. And she sees that. She used to see that kind of stuff constantly. That's where it starts.
What do you think?
I don't know. I think that's a good excuse.
Do you feel it's right?
I feel like I'd want it to be right. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
I want it to be right.
Okay.
I think that that's a partial answer. I think another answer is my way of saying fuck you to my parents. You know, at an early age, you can't really say that to them, but I can do that, you know. And maybe that self-destructive, I've got for years I had this self-destructive line that went through me. And I think it's part of that. That's where it started. And it culminates in when I'm 15, I beat a woman up in an elevator. I had called my dad. I thought my dad was, I was under the impression my dad was going to bring me down to Florida to live with him. And talked to him one Sunday. It was a Sunday. Talked to him one Sunday, and he tells me he's married, you know. And shit, I didn't know anything about that. So we lived out from a hospital, and we used to go to the hospital. We'd hop elevators, you know, ride the floors. So get off the phone, payphone, because I always call my dad on a payphone. Got off the phone, popped in the elevator. Woman comes in, and I beat the shit out of her. And I don't, you know, it's one of those things too where I can look back and I can, you know, product of abuse, you know, not my fault. Truth of the matter is my fault. I'm the guy that did that. And I'm meeting a guy tomorrow. I do a lot of talks these days on abuse and all that. And I'm meeting a guy tomorrow that he calls me up. Jesus, the guy called me up 3-4 weeks ago and actually messaged me. He's like, "Can I talk to you?" I was like, "Yeah, man." So I get him on the phone, and it's supposed to be a 10-minute call. We talked for an hour and a half about how he had been abused as a kid, all the stuff. So he calls me last Sunday. He messages me, and he's like, "I need to ask you a question." I was like, "Okay." So call him up, and he's like, "Look, man, I just talked to the guy who raped me when I was 16. And he wants my advice on that." So I'll walk him through it, and I'm adamant about telling him that, hey, you didn't do anything. You know, it's the guy that did this. You don't owe him a fucking thing. He owes you. You know, and the guys want him to sit down with a counselor and some other shit like that. And I'm like, you don't owe this guy anything. You're the victim here. You need to be sure of that. And as I'm talking to him, because I've never apologized to this lady. Never have. Just scared to death. And as a matter of fact, my first cousin, Frances, she's a counselor in Kentucky now. And it's been like 5 or 6 weeks ago. She's telling me how proud she is of me. And she's like, you know, have you ever thought about reaching out to this lady and just talking to her and trying to tell her, you know, you what you're doing these days and you know what happened and you know that you're sorry. And I was like, "Francis, I don't know if I can do that." So I'm talking to this guy, and all this is coming up. And it occurs to me that, by God, I owe this woman at least a goddamn apology for what I've done. So I'm in the midst now of trying to do that. But I'll tell you, Robert, it's there's never been anything in my life that I'm more sorry for than that right there, ever. And there's not a moment in my life that I don't wish that I could take that shit back, but I can't. That's where that culminates. All right. So I spend 6 months in. They didn't have a juvenile facility. 6 months in solitary confinement at 15. Then get out, and of course, I'm a small town, so I'm the pariah that I should be at that point.
You're a monster.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a small town. Everyone knows what happened.
Sure.
And
do they have counselors in juvie?
so what happens is we take it to court, and I get on the stand and I tell the judge, yeah, I did this. This is what happened. And, of course, the judge finds me guilty. We didn't have a jury or anything. The judge finds me guilty, and he sentences me to a psychiatric evaluation in Louisville, Kentucky. Go up there for 6 weeks. They cut me loose and say, hey, you need counseling. Well, I'm in eastern Kentucky. We don't have any money. And the probation officer at that point in time, he lets it go. So I never go through counseling or anything like that. We had 3 high schools in that county. The first 2 high schools, the first high school, the kids literally stopped me at the door. You're not going to come here. The second high school, the principal tells my mom, my sister can go there. He can't. And by this point in time, my mom's pissed off. She's trying to threaten lawsuits. She was always this person like that. I tell my mom there was a third high school that was out on the far reaches of the county. I was like, hey, just take me there. Please just take me there. So she takes me there. They take me in open arms. They knew who I was, but they take me in. And I was 16 or 17 at that point. And that's the first decent person I met in my life. I walked in, and this woman named Carol Combs, she was an English teacher. And the way she tells it, I hand her my class schedule, and whatever I said, she tells me today that she heard this voice come out, and she was like, I need this guy in my theater department. Well, she became this kind of a surrogate mom to me. First really decent person I'd ever met. And under her, I excelled. I became one of the top English students in the state, head of the academic, head of mock trial. I won best actor and actress in the state. All this bullshit, right? And did really well. Came out of, senior year, I had these scholarships, all this stuff. And did not take scholarships because I found me a girlfriend about the same time. Not the one I'd marry, but little preacher's daughter was who she was. And, I never had a girlfriend because of that stuff that had happened. And went kind of crazy. I was like, I want to be with her. I want to be with her. So what happens is I'm going to the Did
you notice that you were kind of treating her the same way your dad
treated
your mom? So
that got mirrored to a T.
Yeah, that sounds a little uncomfortably similar.
Yeah, to a T, it's mirrored like that. And my mom, she's this person. Like I said, I start talking about her, and the stories I tell, it feels like I minimize the stuff that goes on. But like my sister, for example, my sister is able to. She takes a scholarship for Berea College, really good school, and she's going through it, getting a history degree there. Denise gets a boyfriend. My mom finds out about it, gets pissed off because we're property. So my mom gets in the car, drives to Berea College, walks into the president's office, tells the president that my sister is addicted to drugs, that her boyfriend is not her boyfriend, but her pimp, and wants her thrown out of school. The president believes that bullshit because my mom comes off very good when she starts out. She comes off very good. What saves my sister, a couple of the Berea alumni knew my sister and knew who my mom was and knew how she was. So they go and talk to the president, tell the president my mom's full of shit. President calls my mom. My mom goes ballistic on him. I'll fucking kill you. So Denise gets to stay at school at the end of the day.
Great.
Yeah. With me, with Christy, my mom would call and torment the parents. Your daughter's a whore. Her dad was a preacher, for example. Yeah, you guys are devil worshipers. So she would do whatever she could at that point. That was common with my mom. What happens is I'm in community college. We're putting on a show because I'm a fairly decent actor. Putting on a show. The theater director is friends with a guy named Edward Emanuel, who was the head of the theater department at San Jose State. They fly him in to see his show. And Emmanuel sees me on stage, offers me a full ride scholarship. And I'm like, shit, yeah, we'll take that. So he's like, I'll be back in a few weeks. So he goes. A few weeks later, Emmanuel flies in, drives down to the house. I'm outside shooting basketball with some friends of mine. He pulls up in the car. I go up to meet him. I was like, hey, I'll walk you in and introduce you to my mom. He's like, I got it. So he walks on in. I stay outside. He's in there about 15 minutes. Comes back out, white as a sheet, doesn't say a fucking word, gets in the car, leaves. I found out a few weeks later that what happens is he gets in there. My mom pulls a knife on him. I'll fucking kill you. You're not going to steal my son from me. And that does the scholarship in. He doesn't do the scholarship, but I guess after I talked to Jordan Peterson, we talked about that, and some other people reached out to me. They described it as trauma bonding, that I had a way out that got kind of side-railed because of what my mom did, and then fear of me taking the scholarship and all this other bullshit. But I didn't take the scholarship. And
yeah, why? Why?
I think I just kind of broke my spirit at that point, more than anything.
But it could have done the opposite. It could have just said exactly the reason I need to leave.
Yeah, but didn't.
Interesting.
So at that point, dive into crime. Pretty big. I was with Christy for 5 years, was engaged to her. She finally figures out, oh, this guy's a piece of shit. So she breaks up with me. And within 6 months, I'm married to my first wife, Susan, and fake a car accident to get the money to get married to her. And you're absolutely right that my relationships mirrored to a T my dad's relationship with my mom. That kind of cuck attitude, doing whatever, taking, whatever will make you happy, whatever will make you happy. You're that woman on a pedestal is the way it was. With Susan.
And in your mind, was part of this because you wanted a woman in your life and your mom hadn't been that woman? Or what do you reconcile that somehow with the way your dad was acting?
What I think with me is that I never got the I hate talking about myself like that, but
why?
It's kind of embarrassing. It feels like that, but
consider this therapy part 81 or whatever.
Part 81. What I think it is that lack of love in a relationship, and going back to my mom and my dad, seeing that relationship all the time, seeing my dad continue to try, and he never really succeeded in getting my mom to love him.
Right.
So for years, every single relationship that I had was exactly the same. I would pick women that were a lot like my mom, that were very toxic, and then try to get them to love me, to, usually not working out at all until I meet, my wife now. I forgot where I was on that story, but what happens is I fake a car accident. Susan was, I was on the 7-year program for college, never going to get a degree, just fucking around. Susan was a...
How are you paying for that?
Scholarships, not scholarships, but student loans, Pell Grants, all that bullshit.
Okay, all right. So putting yourself into debt.
Of course, just to fuck around, not doing anything at all.
Okay, all right.
So Susan was a vocal performance major, and I got to be honest, she was not great.
Okay.
She was not great at all. As a matter of fact, she transfers to UK, and she does not make the music department at that point.
So 2 liberal arts degrees going out into the world.
Yeah,
Ouch.
exactly. Ouch. Right. No direction whatsoever. So get married, moved to Lexington. And,
Kentucky, I'm assuming? Not Michigan.
Lexington, Kentucky, UK. Okay. So I'm Wildcat. And I had a job at Lexmark, testing printer boards, and I was working 60 hours a week doing that over 3 days, and it was fucking killing me, right? And at the same time, I'm the idiot that control freak. I tell Susan, hey, don't worry about getting a job. You go to school. And don't worry about the cooking and cleaning. You go to school. I got all this shit. So here I am, 60-hour week job. I've got an 18-hour class load, doing all the cooking, all the cleaning. Can't do all that shit. The job ends because I'm just killing myself doing that. And I start running these little scams around Lexington. I get a job at a telemarketing firm, for example, selling not Kiwanis, but Shriners circus tickets. It was a third-party company that was doing that. So they transitioned from selling Shriners circus tickets once the circus is over to selling food baskets for the Kiwanis Club. So I'm like, well, shit, I can do that. So I steal their phone list, set up my own little fake charity, start selling food baskets that I'm not actually selling food baskets. I'm just pocketing the money. Get caught with that, serve 3 months in a county jail. And those are the types of scams I'm running, not doing good at all. It culminates in that 3 months in the county jail.
Okay, wait. So now this is the second time you've been in jail? Once when you were a kid at 15?
The second time.
Okay.
Second time.
All right. And just briefly, clearly that didn't work. Clearly that wasn't a big enough slap on the wrist to get you to stop.
Right.
What was it for you? Was it just a speed bump? Was it just annoying? Was it what was your impression of jail at that point?
So jail, visits from law enforcement, any type of, at one point I was selling pirated software. I would get the letters from the BSC, the Business Software Corporation, whatever the bullshit thing that was. All of that stuff, or people who would find out who I was and they would call and demand money back or anything else like that. The only thing I viewed that as was a learning exercise. This is how I got caught. This is what you don't do again. So you adapt. How did I get caught? How can I fix that? Continue on.
Got it.
Is the only thing I viewed that as.
Okay.
And the same thing with being in jail, all that stuff. That's the only thing I viewed that as. So what happens?
So it was an F on the report card, but you'll do better next time.
Right. Always try. The consequences were never enough for me to stop. The only consequence that was enough for me to stop was that 15-year-old assault. That was it. All right. Never touch another human being again, but by God, it's too late at that point.
Sure.
All right. What happens is get out of the Kiwanis Club 3-month incarceration, start selling pirated software online.
Actually, can we back up just slightly?
Sure.
How were you pocketing the money? What was the mechanic for it? Were they just giving you credit cards and you were...
Back then, no. Back then it was the website. It was before Craigslist and eBay. I had not found eBay yet. There was a website called Classifieds 2000, kind of a forerunner of Craigslist. And my cousin had the Microsoft suite and the Adobe suite is what he had. So got that, got a CD burner, started burning copies of it, had a crack for other software that was out as well that would turn it into full version. So had that, would write the CD out, had a label printer, so I would put a label on there that said Microsoft Office Suite or Adobe Suite and sell that for $60 a pop. That's what I would do. All right, and then they would send me a check for that because back then PayPal wasn't out yet either at that point. So they'd send you a check.
That's like a virtually perfect crime.
It's not bad.
It's pretty close.
Unless you get somebody that thinks that, hey, we thought we were going to get the retail version and you're selling us pirated shit.
Right, and it's that access code. It's always the same on each one of them.
All the keys are the same.
It's pretty close, though. Pretty close.
Exactly. So what happens is start there, move over into selling pirated video games. So PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn. That moves into installing mod chips so you could play the pirated software, pirated games. Those
So you'd sell entire video game systems at this point?
So what happens is selling the software. In order to play it on PlayStation 1, you had to have a mod chip, so I would offer to install mod chips into the gaming system itself, into the console.
You'd be driving around town soldering stuff in?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Or they'd bring the system to me, and I'd solder it to them. And
This is not
sell
a
some
scalable
software.
business model, my friend.
It is not. It's a lot of...
It's a lot of work.
Breaking the law is a lot of work.
It's a lot of
It's
work.
a lot of work, all right?
I don't think I'd sign up for that.
So that leads into, I was buying mod chips from out of Hong Kong. They had mod chips for cable boxes. So started buying those, turning on all the channels on people's cable television boxes. A lot more money at that point. That leads into satellite DSS cards. So the 18-inch RCA satellite systems, you can take the access card out of it, program it, turn on all the channels. Started doing that. making a lot of money. At the same time, a Canadian judge, this fucking idiot, he actually says it in court. He's like, hey, RCA doesn't sell the systems up here. It's legal for my citizens to pirate the signals. Says that shit in court. Well, what happens is overnight, go down to Best Buy, buy the system for $100, take it out in the parking lot, open it up, throw the system away, take the card, program it, ship it to Canada, $500. Started doing that. About the same time, RCA decides they're going to start switching access cards. They go from F to H or some bullshit like that. You can't get the F cards. I've got a lot of orders. Can't fill them all. And I'm like, why do I need to fill any of them? They're in Canada. I'm down here. Who are they going to complain to? So I don't fill any of the orders. This is about the same time that PayPal starts coming into play too. So it's very easy. People, for some reason, they really trusted PayPal. And PayPal didn't know what the hell they were doing at that point either. So start making a lot of money, not filling any of the orders. Get worried about I'm $4,000 a week roughly is what I'm making. So get worried about the money coming in, thinking I'm going to be looked at for money laundering. Figured the best thing I could do is get a fake driver's license, use that to open up a bank account, launder the money through the account, pull out the funds at the ATM. No idea where to get a fake ID at all. Get online, start looking around. Think I find a guy, send him $200, my picture. He rips me off. Yeah, rips me off. And I get pissed. Yeah.
That is the life of crime, because you have to be able to trust. The network is complicated.
Yeah.
Like really, really complicated, because all it takes is one person in that network to start, they start taking one or two people out, and those one or two take four people out.
That's it.
It's gnarly.
So he ripped me off, and I left out, if you want the Beanie Baby story, I'll tell you that bullshit. So the first real, I find eBay along the same time.
What year approximately? This must have been fairly.
It's right as eBay transitions from the Pez sales to the auction site. So eBay starts out as a Pez
2000?
Yeah, no, this has been 97, 98.
Okay.
That's when this is.
All right, so they were still like a white background.
Right.
It looks almost like Craigslist back then.
No security features whatsoever.
Right.
You could look up they had their real information there. You could pull their phone number.
I was there around, I don't know, maybe 2003 or 5 or something like that. So
yeah, after we had already,
they had a lot more security.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Back when I was doing it, they didn't.
Yeah, interesting.
And so what happens is
it's your fault.
Yeah, I find eBay, liked eBay a lot. No idea how to make money on it. Bill O'Reilly used to be on Inside Edition. So they're talking about Beanie Babies one night, and they're profiling Peanut the Royal Blue Elephant, $1,500 on eBay. And I'm sitting there going, shit, need to find me a Peanut. Skip class the next day. I had this idea. Hell, I'm in Kentucky. There's got to be one in a bin someplace. So skip class the next day. They go around to all the Hallmark stores looking for this damn Peanut. It takes dipshit here 3 hours to figure out, no, he's not on eBay. He's not on the store. He's on eBay for $1,500. They had the gray elephants for $8. It's the exact same elephant. Color was just different. So I'm like, $8. Buy the elephant for $8. Stop by Kroger on the way home, pick up a pack of blue Rit dye, go home, try to dye the little guy. Yeah. Had this fucking mop bucket, man. Had the blue dye in there. Put the elephant in there, he'd float to the top. So then you take a spatula, you're trying to stab the guy down in there, right? Keep him down in there so the dye will take effect. Pull him out. Looks like he's got the mange because he's made out of polyester. He doesn't hold dye very well. So then you try to let him dry, and he's all splotchy and everything. So yeah, it's fucked up. So what happens is I find a picture of a real one, post it on eBay. This woman thinks I have the real thing. She wins the bid, $1,500. Send her a message. I was like, hey, lady, congratulations, you win the bid. We've never done any business before. I don't even know if I can trust you. What I need you to do is go down to the U.S. Postal Service, pick up a couple of money orders for $1,500. They're issued by the U.S. government. They protect you. They protect me. You send me those, I'll send you your elephant. She believes that shit. Sends me the money orders. I cash them out. Send her this creature in the mail. Yeah. And I did it under my own name. That's the worst part about it. I had no idea about online crime at that point. Right. Did it under my own name. She calls me. This is not what I ordered. My response, because I'm an asshole. Lady, you ordered a blue elephant. I sent you a blue-ish elephant. and the thing is that's a weird story because that's kind of a microcosm of the way most frauds operate online. You've got a victim, a potential victim, that really wants something. You've got an asshole like me that doesn't have it, but's going to rip you off. So that lust, that greed of wanting that object allows me to come in and establish trust with you easier, to convince you that I've got that. And because you want it so much, you stopped acting rationally and logically, and you just react emotionally. Mm-hmm. So that's what happens. And the first lesson of that is, you delay that victim long enough, you just keep putting them off, they get exasperated, they go away, they don't call law enforcement.
And I think there's another subset of that, which is they might know how to call law enforcement, but they're just not going to.
And why is that?
Oh, probably a million reasons. I mean, they might be doing crime themselves. They might just not want to deal with the cops because it's a big mess. The cops kind of hassle them, maybe don't believe them at all, so it's a big waste of time.
Or the cops think that they deserve it.
Yeah, right. So there's some of that. It's honestly kind of a pain in the ass working with the cops. Sometimes they just don't even know how to deal with that kind of crime, so they just pussyfoot around and let the criminal go away because it takes 6 months to build a case on it or whatever.
Well, you see that today, right, with a lot of crypto schemes. You see that local law enforcement, typically, they're not trained.
Not qualified, yeah.
They have no idea what's going on. Federal law enforcement, they don't have the manpower to handle everybody. Then you've got all these security companies and mass media and family that blame the victim for the crime that's perpetrated upon them.
I remember I was having this conversation, this quite a few years back, but it was... I was invited to some event or something, and there was some FBI booth or whatever. So I went up to go talk to him just to kind of like feel him out, like what's going on. And I happened to be talking to one of the head cyber people for the FBI. I'm like, cool, like let's have a conversation. So I asked him like a simple question, like, okay, you have all these weird logs that come from disparate places that you need to process, right? Some are Apache boxes, some are ISS boxes, all different time zones, all messy. Some don't have certain headers turned on, some do. How do you reconcile that mess?
Right.
And I was expecting him to say, oh, we've got this extremely complicated system that handles all this stuff and blah, 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 blah,
nope.
blah. He's like, well, I've got some Perl scripts. I'm like, you have Perl scripts? Is that really? That's the best the FBI, you are the best, and that is the best the FBI has to offer, Perl scripts? Because that was my answer. That's how I dealt with it. I'm like, that is not the answer, sir.
Right.
Well,
so you think about the FBI, 37,000 employees, 37,000 agents, 56 field offices. How many of those 37,000 concentrate on cybercrime?
That's a good question. I actually don't know.
So it blew my mind.
Do you know the answer?
I do.
Okay.
Less than 280.
And probably a half to a third are dealing with child pornography, I would assume.
Child pornography, nation state attacks.
Right, which, that's going to be a big part.
Right.
So probably 50 to 100 max dealing with this type of fraud.
Right. Now, the fortunate thing is you take the Wild West of cybercrime now is Telegram, and Telegram's filled with fucking idiots. They talk too much. They don't really have any operational security at all, so it's very easy to identify those targets. Mm-hmm. But you take somebody that knows what they're doing, it's very difficult to catch that guy. And there's so many of them out now that you're not going to arrest them all.
And even if you wanted to, the extradition treaties and, I mean, this is like 20, 30 years back. Even back then, the people who really knew what they were doing, they were bouncing around from multiple countries because they knew they couldn't get extradition treaties to get data from the other countries. So,
well, with Shadow Crew, I mean, so for us operating in the United States, we knew the dollar amounts of the cities that we were operating in that would attract federal law enforcement attention.
So as long as you were under that.
Right.
And do you break it up per city, or do you smurf it and do it many times in a single city and then move on, or do you kind of do it all?
Well, of course, you're doing identity theft, so you just one account.
So you're hoping that they don't say, oh, this is probably all the same person.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Now, nowadays, back then they didn't know how to do that. These days, they're very good about putting it all together.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems like a signal I'd figure out pretty quick.
Oh, this is all Brett Johnson. Yeah. Pretty quick.
It's literally that guy right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'd like to spend a little time talking about social engineering since you brought it up.
Sure.
I think there's a lot to say about it. So we don't have to spend like tons of time on it, but I think it would be useful for the audience to hear like what does a pretexting attack look like? How do you actually go about starting a conversation with somebody and getting them to trust you from nothing and getting something out of them?
So understand that when we're talking about social engineering, there's a difference between that white hat, that gray hat, and that black hat social engineer.
Sure.
All right. I love Hardnay that does all of his bullshit. The guy's good. I like him. All right. That's not how a criminal social engineer works. We don't go to DEF CON and steal everyone's laptops. We don't pull bullshit like that. The idea is you're going to try to manipulate that victim into doing something without that victim even understanding what's happened. It's going to be
for
their
potentially
choice.
a long time, or maybe even ever.
Hopefully forever.
Right.
At least until you get that information, access, data, or cash.
And leave.
Right. And leave. That's the big thing. All right. So it's not these flamboyant types of attacks. It's whatever you need to do, the least bit that you have to do to get that victim to respond the way you want.
Okay, that least part. I think that is lost on almost all security people for some reason. I think people like to say it's like this string of complicated things and they're going to do this and this and this, but that's not economic. It's not profitable. You really do need to keep these conversations relatively short. Otherwise, you're spending all day talking to somebody to get one thing done.
That's it.
So you have to be pretty concise. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, how do you choose the right thing?
So what you're doing is taking cybercrime, all right? And I believe in this thing. I like to call it the trickle-down theory of cybercrime. Mm-hmm. You've got one specific technique or method or what have you, or tool that's being used in one specific area of cybercrime. For example, SIM swaps, all right? That starts with trying to steal people's cryptocurrency accounts. And over 16 months, it bleeds down into taking over people's credit card accounts because it becomes more ubiquitous, easier to use, cheaper to implement over time, all right? Looking at online fraud, at social engineering, it begins with layering trust. How do you establish trust in an online environment? Because if I can't get you as a potential victim to trust me, I can't get information, access, data, or cash. So how does trust work in an online environment? I would say technology, tools, social engineering. We inherently trust that technology which is given to us, our phones, laptops, software, what have you, websites we visit. We trust that without really understanding it. Most people have no clue of how this bullshit operates. Mm-hmm. So we trust it out of the gate. What we don't understand is that criminals use a variety of tools to manipulate that technology. They use spoofed phone calls, proxy addresses, stolen browser fingerprints, cookie injections, what have you, in order to come in and simply open that door of trust. All right? Once that door is open, then we see that social engineering attack tend to happen at that point. And how does that happen? So the way it used to work is an account takeover, for example. I need to convince that customer service agent at that bank to let me have control of that account. How do I do that? Well, the only thing I need to control the account is control of the phone number. Just that simple thing, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'll call in. Before I call in, I'll go to the dark web or some criminal marketplace. I'll buy someone's bank account information. $40, it gets me the name, address, phone number, log in, maybe some bank account details as well. Once I have that, I'm going to pull the complete identity profile on that potential victim. All right, so I'm going to build every single thing that I possibly can to answer any security questions that victim, that customer service agent may ask me. All right, once I have that profile, I'm going to spoof the phone number, call into customer service. So the customer service agent, remember, it's technology, tools, social engineering. Customer service agent, they've got the terminal in front of them. They trust that terminal. They don't understand that I'm using a tool, a spoofed phone call, to manipulate the technology that's in front of them. So they see the phone number coming in that's supposed to be connected to that specific account. Mm-hmm. Trust is already there, all right? I'm going to call in. The idea is to build rapport with that customer service agent and to distract that customer service agent to where they will do what I want them to do.
And hopefully not send you a code.
Right. So what I'm wanting to do ultimately is just change the phone number to a prepaid phone that I've got. All right. So I'm going to call in. What is my available balance on file? Only thing I'm going to ask. I can't call in and say, I need to update my phone number, because that's not what you do. If I do that out of the gate, the chances of them booting me up to another level of verification is pretty good at that point. I don't want that. I want the customer service agent to take care of that for me, because they can. All right. So what I'm going to do is, what's my available balance? They're going to ask me 2 security questions. One of those questions is going to be mother's maiden name. Mm-hmm. I've got the mother's maiden name,
right?
But I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say some other name, but I'm going to say it with confidence. So Johnson. That's not what we've got. Well, what have you got? Well, sir, we can't tell you what we've got. So how do you respond at that point? With me, typically anger. Look, I don't know what you've got. I know what my mom's name is. What are you people even doing at that point? So what are they trained to do? They're trained at that point to ask you 2 more security questions, which I have the answers to. I answer those correctly, then what happens? Then they change the mother's maiden name to whatever I want them to change the mother's maiden name to. Now, that's not the point of the call, but what's happened at that is I've created a problem, all right? I've missed the mother's maiden name. When I create that problem, that's okay. We are going to solve it together. And as we solve it together, I'm going to build rapport with you, and I'm going to layer more trust as we go along, okay? Now, once that problem is solved, you, the customer service agent, you mentally disconnect from that call. You're already thinking, okay, that problem's solved. You're already looking forward to the next call. It's at that point that I strike. Oh, by the way, as we're getting ready to hang up, can you update my phone number on file? Yes, sir, we can do that. All right?
They've already done you a favor.
They've already done that.
And when someone has done you a favor, they're much more likely.
They're already saying yes. Mm-hmm. Already saying yes at that point.
Interesting.
And they're already disconnected. And because they're already mentally disconnected from the call, I've been asked before, why are you updating the phone number? And my answer has been, I no longer have that number. I no longer have the number that's literally on the screen in front of them.
That you just called from.
Right. And it goes through just fine at that point. All right. So that's a typical type of social engineering. That doesn't take long to do that. But it gives you the keys to the kingdom of that specific account, because of any change on that account, any type of question that comes up, they're going to call the phone number that's on file that I control.
All right. So that requires a ton of acting skills.
Sure.
So I know you have some of that from your prior life.
Right.
How do you refine it? How do you get to the point where you even knew to do that?
So what you do is say I'm calling in, and you do a lot. Of course, it's a cold call.
Sure.
You don't know when you dial. You don't know if you're going to get an English-speaking, someone from America, someone that's from India or Pakistan. You don't know if someone's going to be trained, if someone's brand new, reading off a script, what have you. So you have over time, and this is one of the things that you find out with cyber criminals or fraudsters in general. A newbie typically is scared to death of a phone. All right, they think that their voice is going to be logged, that they're going to be tracked down. They're scared to death. They're not confident. But the more crime you commit, you get that confidence over time until finally you pick up that phone. All right. When you pick up the phone, that's a learning process too, because you have to be an active listener. You have to understand almost immediately, hey, is this a new hire? Is this person confident on the phone? Do I need to respond with anger or respond with some sort of anxiety? How do I need to respond to this person? So you have to start reading that person almost immediately. Now with me, what happens is, because of the childhood, I was a social engineer as a child because I had to understand the adults in my circle.
Because they represented a threat?
Exactly. So you have to know that, and you have to be able to respond to that and be able to start to manipulate those adults at the same time. Mm-hmm. Then later on, and I'm not the only guy that does that, you see a lot of these cyber criminals that come from similar environments that have developed those skills as children, and then we use them as adults to victimize other people at that point. Okay? But the idea is you want to do the minimum you can so that you're not raising any flags, so that potential victim, they don't even know they're being manipulated. They think they're choosing to do that of their own accord, whatever that is. Okay? Mm-hmm. And it's everyone is, and you learn that in acting as well, but it's you do it in the moment. So it's not coming up with a script or this is the way I want things to be.
It's closer to improv.
Right.
Obviously.
Right.
It is improv, just not funny. Well, it may be funny to you afterwards.
Well, that's one of the things, right? Is when I was actively breaking the law, I mean, I didn't give a shit about victims at all. And it was a big joke, and you know, whatever I can get them for is what I'll get them for. Absolutely.
Okay, that's a good segue. So at some point, you kind of have to dismiss empathy, but yet you still have to play the part of empathy.
Right.
That is kind of textbook sociopathy, you know?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm not saying you are that, but at minimum, you were telegraphing that symptom.
Well, and I have a lot of problems with that.
Okay.
All right. I don't like being called a sociopath.
I didn't call you a sociopath.
No, but and the thing is, maybe I am. Okay. Maybe I am. I hope to hell that I'm not. All right. And I try to justify that. I try to say, you know, hey, I was always justifying my crimes, saying, you know, I did it for my family, my wife, my stripper girlfriend. And I don't think that sociopaths do that. But now you're absolutely right. That behavior is a very sociopathic behavior. Being able to set empathy to the side, or act like I've got empathy when I really don't give a damn about that potential victim.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think you probably are. I know a lot of sociopaths. I don't necessarily think I've ever talked about this on this podcast before. We're doing it today.
Why not today?
We're doing it today. So I have a lot of sociopath friends. I've collected them over the years.
You've collected them?
Yes.
Okay.
I have probably, I would guess, somewhere around 15-ish that I consider to be friends. Like I, go have a beer with them or whatever, hang out with them. And a lot of people think that's like horrible, like, oh my gosh. But it really isn't. It's more like, think of a normal person, just, has all the empathy in the world, normal person, and you just remove one complicating factor to their personality. It's not an additional thing.
Right.
It's just removing one thing. So their motives are much more clear. It's much easier to work with them as long as you can keep your interests in alignment. That's a big problem if you can't. But if you're good at understanding what motivates other people and saying, okay, well, you want X out of life. Okay, well, if we can put our backs together and fight the same war together,
sure,
no problem. In fact, it's easier because they don't have complicating factors about empathy. They're not trying to pretend like they're altruistic or whatever, especially if you call them out on it, especially if you get them in a corner a little bit. Not to say I'm going to out you, but like, we already know what you are. So let's just get past that point and move on, right? And in one case, the guy had no idea he was a sociopath, like at all. He's like, never even heard the word.
Could be me.
Well, no, I had to explain it to him. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's me, 100%. Yes, that's definitely me. I'm like, okay, great. And now we can be friends with that knowledge and work together, putting our backs together. And I will not be upset if you see me burning in a fire and don't try to pull me out because you just don't care, right? It's not, you don't go to war with them like over morals. You go to war with them over like tactics, like individual things that need to be done. So with that said, I don't think you fit that.
So what do I fit? Because I'm not trying to be an asshole.
No, I didn't think you were.
I really am interested in knowing.
Yeah. I honestly don't think you are. It has a lot to do with your childhood, but it also has to do with what you're doing now. Because true sociopaths don't give a shit. They don't give a shit about what anyone thinks about them. They're playing a part. They play a role. So that acting thing is right in the strike zone. So that's right. But the part about you hitting somebody and feeling the part, or you're like, I know that she feels the way or whatever, you're talking about her and her feelings, even a little bit. That's feeling her pain. That's empathy. You're already disqualified.
Okay.
You're out. You're not a sociopath. I'm not saying you couldn't lie about that.
Sure.
But I am saying that if that's true, where you actually can sense what she must have been feeling when you walked in and started hitting her,
right,
that makes you not a sociopath right there. And so you can flush that from your system, right? Similarly, later in life, you had a series of relationships that didn't go well.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that as well. But I know that you have said, she felt like I was a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So you're sensing, not maybe you're semi-reciting things from memory that she said, but it doesn't sound to me like you're playing back, it's not like you're rewinding the tape and pressing play. She said that I was a piece of shit. She thought I was a piece of shit. Right. That's empathetic thinking. So it doesn't sound correct to me.
Okay.
Based on all the people I know who are sociopaths. I guess that makes me sound a little like a sociopath, but really, the reason it happened is one of my best friends when I was very young, one of my very first real friends, he was definitely a sociopath, but I didn't know that. I didn't even know what it was. I had no idea, no context, but I saw him do something very bad to a mutual friend of ours. And it was sort of meant as a joke, but it became a life-threatening situation very quickly. And I was like, holy shit, that guy's going to die. We got to get in the hospital right now kind of deal. And he was just laughing his ass off.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, no. This isn't a joke. Like, he could actually die. Like, like this is blood coming out. Like, we got to go. And he was acting so weird, something so different than I would expect, because it's funny at first, right? And then then
it gets serious,
and then the
quick.
Joke is over, right? Like, whoa, all hands on deck. Let's get this guy in a hospital. And it troubled me. It stuck with me. Like, what the fuck was going on with that guy? Like just something weird.
Did you ever approach him about it? Or?
Yeah. But quite a while later, and I had to research, what is it that causes people to do that? And then I read about sociopathy. I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. And then it's like other things start replaying in my head. I'm like, yeah, okay. So that's what he's like. So he's still a friend. He's like at that time, he was like one of my best friends. And I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to work with him, since I don't want to just kick him out of my life. He's a very good friend of mine, knowing that he will watch me die in a fire and just wave at me because he has no empathy, cannot feel the fact that I'm dying, But if he thinks he'll lose something, if he thinks that by the loss of having me in his life will be meaningful to him, he will reach into the fire and grab me out.
So then does it have to have that degree of how does this benefit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so a lot of your story sounds like that.
Right.
But not all of it.
Okay.
And it's sociopathy you can't turn on and off. That's not how it works.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of my story sounds like that.
It does sound like that. But then it doesn't sound like that again. You know what I mean? And that's the part where I think it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
So I don't know if that makes you feel better.
Maybe.
Because you're acting in a way that is not great. Actually, let me rephrase that, because great has a sense of morality associated with it. Right. And I don't feel like it's deserved, because in this case, I truly believe that you are an amalgam of mostly upbringing and then not having anybody in your formative years through adolescence and maybe even beyond who really were there for you through thick and thin to slap you on the wrist, go like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this crime? Look, get to fucking work. Yes, it's hard. Yes. But it's way less hard than being in jail and losing your loved ones and, having this, it was an adventure, but it wasn't the kind of adventure that leads you down a positive path.
Right. I got you.
Okay. Sorry. I was not trying to get on a high horse there. I was actually...
No, I appreciate it.
I actually think that informs how I think about you.
Okay.
When I watch your stuff online and I think about you, I don't think there's somebody with no soul. That's not what I feel. I feel like you were corrupted heavily early in life. And this is like the Hitler Youth, not to say you were a Nazi here, but or like the kids growing up with Hezbollah as like their role models or something. Right. Like, would I be somebody like shooting rockets at Israel right now? Probably. Probably, if that's the group of people I grew up with.
Right.
I can't imagine how else I would have evolved.
But and I talked about this with Peterson as well. So where do you draw that line? Because when I give a presentation, I am very straightforward and cut and dried that, I had this shitty childhood, okay? But at the end of the day, it was my choice to go off and commit crime. All right, now that's what I say in a presentation. The truth of the matter is that it's more complicated than that.
Sure is.
All right? But I can't say that in a presentation because nobody wants to hear that shit. Nobody wants to hear that, hey, I'm the guy that
I don't know.
I had a fucked up childhood and it helped lead me into this life of crime.
I don't know that that's true.
Because
I don't think it's true. I think people are prepared for the complexity of there's a mix. There's a mix of you when you were a kid and fuck, you had a terrible upbringing. I mean, I'm sorry, man, that sucks. I've known people in similar situations and I've seen their life progress and it's very divergent. Some go down the path that you went down and some just on a whim go to church one day and, you know, out of desperation for nothing else. And then maybe they don't even believe, but they're just trying to find anything to hang their hat on. And all of a sudden their life just, you know, 360, like let's, you know, spin around, like everything's got to go, everything's got to change. And it's not necessarily just that they found God, but they found a direction, or sometimes it can be a loved one or whatever, like, or a death in the family.
So what's that separates the two? Because by God, I don't know. And that's one of the things that this whole thing with the Brett Johnson show, you know, I've transitioned into being that these days.
Did you ever decide to be a good guy?
Yeah.
When?
Yeah. Past few years.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Right there.
I made that active decision.
That's the only way it works. You can't be forced into it. It can't just be chance. You have to have the wandering spirit in the other way. You know, you have the wandering spirit, or had, past tense, wandering spirit to move into a life of crime. But at some point you hooked back and you had that wandering spirit back. Like, what would life be like if I started taking this other path? And now you're experiencing that.
That was a scary thing, man.
I bet it is. I bet it's still fucking scary.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because the shoe could drop at any time. Like, people come after you. I mean, I know people have come after you.
Yeah.
That's bold and dangerous and a new, exciting experience as well, though. You could treat that like a bold elixir and just keep drinking that fucking elixir. And all of a sudden your life becomes this new, interesting thing over here. And man, I mean, I think it's kind of exciting to watch. I mean, very few people get to experience both sides.
Yeah.
They experience one and they stay on the right side of the law. Maybe they, you know, speed or something, but they're not out there doing it. Or maybe they've done drugs twice, you know, you know what I mean? You know the type, right? And they're like flat on this side and they're the good guys. Frankly, I don't trust a lot of those people because they tend to end up exploding, like midlife crisis, and doing just crazy things and cheating on their wives, or they'll join companies that are like straight up doing fraud, but you know, they're the good guys. And like, I just don't trust those people. I really don't. I need somebody who's kind of been somewhere in the middle, done some amount of crime and then in their youth and kind of moved back. No, seriously, because at least then they know where that line is and they've hooked. They've made that active decision to be good. It's not just that they're afraid of being bad. They're actively being good. And in your case, you were kind of flat on the other side, like, holy shit.
Yeah, let's go to extremes.
Obviously, I wouldn't trust that person either. I wouldn't trust you up to, you know, a handful of years ago, let's say, or whatever. But then you hooked back. And that's a much bigger distance to travel. I mean, from the point at which you, I'm not spoiling anything too much here, but like escaped prison, for instance. I mean, that is a pretty big distance between those two places. It really is. And I don't think the jail time is the thing that did it.
No, it's not.
I don't
Absolutely
think it did.
Not.
So it wasn't the slapping on the wrist. It wasn't all that stuff. It was an active decision you actively made. You're like, fuck, I hate this. I hate this. Maybe you're getting old. And you're like, what am I going to do in retirement? I mean, I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was. What was it?
So I got out, and we'll go through the prison experience, but got out in 2011, and the day I got out was planning on going back to crime. No doubt about it. My dad meets me at a bus station. He's going to drive me to the halfway house. I taught my dad how to do tax return identity theft. So
perfect.
Yeah, he had a stack of gift cards for me. He had cash for me, everything else. And had planned on going right back to it. Not a doubt in my mind about it. And
why did he become supportive of the crime? I can see why your mom was kind of already there, but why your dad?
So Dad always had, and my dad passed away in October of last year. And he needed to go. He was suffering. I mean, he was going through bad times.
Okay.
But Dad always had that criminal mindset, but he was never motivated. Remember I told you that before? He never had any type of motivation to do anything. And my mom rode his ass about that constantly. You know, you'll never get off your ass and do anything. All right. what happens is my mom leaves my dad. I don't have a conversation with my dad for Jesus, probably 25 years.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he showed up at my wedding for 15 minutes. All right. He shows up when I had that assault with that elevator. I got to see him for maybe 20 minutes, just sporadic throughout, maybe 15, 20 minutes at a time.
Was it his choice or your choice?
He was the guy that was out of sight, out of mind. Now, when I became an adult, it was absolutely my choice too. Mm. But, when you're a child, that's the parent's choice at that point. And the way he explained it after we reconciled was that association with my mom. He just didn't want to do that.
Well, too fucking late, man. You made a kid.
Yeah, right. But so he shows up at my prison sentencing. Had no idea the man was going to show up there. Stands up in front of the judge, tells the judge, I want to make sure that Brett gets a good start when he gets out. He can live with me. I want to make sure he's good to go. He starts to, now at that point in time, I'm already planning on escaping. He starts to visit me. So what happens is, let's go through that. What happens is, Shadow Crew, and we'll backtrack with Shadow Crew. Shadow Crew makes the front cover of Forbes, August of 2004. Headline, Who's Stealing Your Identity? October 26, 2004, United States Secret Service, they arrested 33 people, 6 countries, 6 hours. I'm the only guy that's publicly mentioned as getting away. They pick me up February 8th, 2005.
How did they know? How did they find you or everybody else?
So what happens is our forum techie, a guy named Albert Gonzalez, he was actually released back in June. All right. Albert Gonzalez, we had this thing called the CVV1 hack. Not a hack. We were doing all these phishing attacks, getting debit card numbers, getting PINs. In order for you to encode that on a card, you have to have complete track 2 information. So track 2 is the card number / 16-digit algorithm outside of that. You have to know that algorithm or it's not going to encode. Back then, you didn't have to know that algorithm. Back then, none, and I mean none, of the financial institutions that implemented the hash on that.
Let alone chip and pin or anything.
Exactly. So what you could do is you had the card number, you had the PIN. For track 2, you take the card number / any 16 digits. It would encode. Take it to an ATM, you got the PIN. Start pulling cash out, all right? And we were pulling a lot of cash out. Back before that CVV1 hit, we were doing just card not present fraud. You'd buy an item online with stolen credit card details, and a good carder would profit $30,000 to $40,000 a month.
And are you having mules do this for you? Are you doing it on yourself?
Back then, it was just yourself doing that.
Jesus.
Right?
Wow.
So you'd
that's
run
a crazy risk.
Yeah, you'd run drop addresses. You'd have the items shipped in. You'd relist it on eBay, sell it for 80%, and you'd profit 30 to 40K a month, all right? When that CVV1 hits, that becomes 30 to 40K a day, and that is when the mule game comes into play, because a lot of the people that were providing information were the Ukrainians at that point in time. So the Ukrainians, they couldn't run cards in their area because everything had been shut down because of the amount of fraud. Mm-hmm. So they had to rely on us stateside to do that. And it was a 70-30 or 60-40 split. They'd keep 60%. They'd give the cashier 40%. All right. So, and then you have to worry about how do you send money at that point. So you're doing Western Union.
I like how you call it a cashier.
Yeah. Right. But you're doing Western Union. You're doing prepaid debits, track numbers sent across the line, and then finally you're doing eGold, Liberty Reserve, which are precursors to today's cryptocurrency.
Sure.
So,
and that which blew everything wide open.
Wide open.
Yeah.
Wide open.
Yeah.
So what happens is my forum techie, Albert Gonzalez, he starts doing the CVV1 hack. And so he's in New Jersey one day, broad daylight, standing at an ATM for 40 minutes. He's got a white stack of cards. He's got a backpack on his back. He's putting one card in, pulling out $20 bills, stuffing it in the backpack. Over and over and over and fucking over again. Meanwhile, just so happens, across the street, 2 New Jersey cops are over there. They start noticing this kid for 40 minutes.
Dumb fucking luck. That's why you use mules.
That's it. So one cop looks at the other and says, I want to go and ask this guy what the fuck.
Right.
Walks up to Albert. Albert's wearing this wig. Got this disguise on. Albert falls apart right there. Mm-hmm. So Albert goes to work for the Secret Service. Now, back then, and it's changed today. Today, Secret Service, FBI, law enforcement, they really know what they're doing.
Sure.
Back then, they were fucking idiots. Back then, they literally asked him, hey, how would you track these guys? And Albert says, well, have you ever thought of a VPN? And the response was, no shit. The response was, what's a VPN? So he tells them, they're like, that's a really good idea. So they're paying Albert $75,000 a year for this shit. All right.
To set up a VPN?
To set up a VPN, start tracking everybody.
Okay, so everyone's routing their traffic through this VPN now?
So what Albert does, I had quit. I was doing the tax return identity theft. We had intercepted text messages of the Secret Service investigating us, and I was like, time to duck out.
I see.
So I quit at about the same time that Albert comes back online from being arrested. All right?
Okay, but all right. So you decide to quit and you just don't bail out of the country?
No, I don't.
Why?
Because I'm a fucking idiot and I'm got my stripper fiance at this point.
But take her with. I mean, you're making $30,000 a week or whatever.
Well, I'm pulling $160K a week on tax fraud.
So yeah, get the fuck out.
Yeah, right. I'm a fucking idiot.
Wow.
It turns out law enforcement were not the only fucking idiots. So Albert sets up the VPN. The hierarchy that I'd left in place of the mods and admins, anyone that disagreed with Albert, he banned immediately at that point. Got any questions, got any problems, you're gone. All right, so he could operate everything. Albert then says, he announces that, hey, because law enforcement's looking at these forums, any and all transactions have to go through the VPN because it's more secure. Well, they bought that hook, line, and sinker, and that's where you get, when on the indictments, you get $3.4 million worth of stolen credit cards coming through at that point.
Right, they can find damages.
So they got drop addresses, they got real names, they got everything else.
And they also know who's getting compromised too, which is nice.
Exactly. So they had all that bullshit, and they go around all 33 people. They picked me up. What had happened is my first wife, I was married to her for 9 years, lied to her every fucking day, every day. Took her 3 years to find out I was a fraudster. Next 6 years were me telling her I've quit, I'm going to quit, I will quit, just a little while longer, until finally I got fed up and started looking at her and say, hey, you like spending the money, don't you? So she cheats on me because, looking back now, I figured that's the only way she figured she could get out of the relationship. She cheats on me.
Was she right?
Yeah, she was. That would be the
because otherwise you just would have followed her to the end of the earth.
Absolutely. But that cheating, done right there. Okay. I find out about it. But
that's funny because that's not like your dad. Your dad would have stuck it out.
So that was the difference.
That is a difference.
That was the difference right there. I do not do that at all.
Interesting.
All right? So find out she's cheating on me. I put a keylogger on her computer and found pictures and all this other bullshit.
Okay, pause. That is interesting. So I too did not trust one girl in particular, and I did things to her computer where I could see anything I wanted. Of course you did. So I could see anything I wanted to. And of course she was cheating on me. But after it was over, after the event, I realized how stupid it was. Like, if I don't trust her, why do it to begin with? Why bother? Because if I had found nothing, it's not like I would have started trusting her.
So that's the key right there, boys and girls. If you're in a relationship and you feel like you have to do that, you already need to end that fucking thing.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was my big takeaway after done it. I'm like, I'm never fucking hacking any of my girlfriends ever again.
Right.
That's like, it's not going to do it because it's just going to be a feeling. The day I realize I don't trust this person, that's the day.
Exactly. You need to just end it right there.
Yeah. Why put myself through more agony if I don't trust them?
That's it.
Because you're not going to get trust back once you lose it.
Yeah, it's done. It's done. You're done. The relationship's over. You just don't know it yet.
So did you have the same sensation afterwards, or did you like, that was vindicated, I'm glad I did it?
I felt dirty. I'd never done anything like that before. Felt like a piece of shit that I was. And so find out she's in the bedroom asleep. When I find out, I just get my ass up, walk in the bedroom, open up the wardrobe, get a suitcase out, throw it on the bed, open it up, start throwing her clothes in. She wakes up. Where are you going? I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. You are. And we were a week breaking up at that point.
Why did it take so long?
Because I didn't want to. I knew it was there, but I didn't want to. So
That is a little like your dad.
Yeah, and the thing is I was married to Susan for 9 years. During that entire 9 years, the first real conversation we had was right there. That was the first one.
How did it go?
Everything else, that was the first time I was really truthful with her, open about her, telling her about my childhood, about, hopes and dreams and everything else. But I knew it was over at that point too. And that's one of the weird things about me. The people who are close to me, I have a lot of problems opening it up to them, even today. So like you watch me on a stage or a podcast like this one right here. Oh, I'm open as hell because I don't know you. So I don't really, if you want to judge me, you don't like me, that's fine. But I can be open with you. And for some odd reason, that is like a therapeutic thing for me too. Because as I'm talking, I'm learning more about myself.
More podcasts.
That's it, right? That's all the podcasts I can be on. That's this fucking guy right here. So talk to her.
I'm cheaper than therapy. Well, you did have to fly in.
I flew. But I'm in Austin, so I get some good barbecue and In-N-Out burger.
That's right.
So we break up, and I was in Charleston, South Carolina. I come back, and man, I'm crying every fucking day. I mean, just walking around the house in this kind of just zombie type stupor,
Yeah.
And didn't have any friends because when you're a criminal, you don't have fucking friends,
Okay, pause again. Sorry, this is really interesting. So I've always said there's 3 groups of people that are very similar, extremely similar. People who are in the mob, cybersecurity experts, and spooks. Those 3 groups of people, and cybersecurity experts and mob, you could be similar to what you're talking about. And I would classify that as organized crime when you have shadow crew. It's a crew.
Right, it is.
So
we ran it like a mob.
Yeah. So those 3 groups all have the same problem. They can't trust anybody.
Right.
All the data, everything that they work on has to be secret at all times from basically everybody. No one can talk about anything. And therefore, you can never have real good friend relationships because you're always compartmentalizing.
Well, you've got the conference friends, right?
I mean, you have neighbors and you wave at, and somebody will come over and watch the ball game with you or something. But you don't have those really deep friendships like you might have if you were just, 2 construction workers hanging out or something or whatever, where there's really no reason to have any secrets other than like what you jerk off to or something. You know what I mean? But yet you kind of have to have friends. I mean, if you don't, you just kind of are alone.
Right.
And it sucks. I mean,
why would you think you have to have friends?
Have to. Have to implies if I don't, something will truly break. Do I feel like you have to have friends?
Now, I would argue that, yes, you need friends. You need social interaction.
I think I am one of those people who could live their entire lives without a single friend. I could get away with it. But boy, it would be rough. It would be rough. It would be very rough. And I've lost some very good friends recently. And so I feel like there's that piece that's missing. Sure. And yet I know I could continue if I lost more friends. It would suck and I would really not like it, but I could do it. So I don't think have to, but there is something that is lacking about not being able to be open and just having like, here's this crazy thing that's happening, whatever this thing is. So when you're talking with the shadow crew, you didn't have any of that? Like you couldn't, is that?
So here's the thing.
Okay.
All right.
Uh-huh.
There's a difference between us saying it and us doing it.
Okay.
All right. So for example, we know how to go on the run. We know what that actually entails. All right. And how to do it properly. We know that. Mm-hmm. And I used to teach that shit. Now, does that mean that you actually do that shit? Probably not. For example, we knew that, hey, if you keep going, if you keep stealing so much money, at some point you're going to get caught. So you need an exit strategy. And every single one of us talked about our exit strategy, and we said this is exactly our numbers right here. Now, does that mean that any of us followed it? No. Same thing with friends. All right. You've got Heat 2 over on the rack there. All right. In Heat, Robert De Niro's always this big guy of, 30 seconds. Got to be able to get out.
God,
right?
I love that movie so much.
Great film. Now, just because you say that shit, does that shit mean that that's true? No. Just because I'm sitting here saying that, hey, on one level I can say I never had friends. But you're right in saying that you have to have friends.
I think so.
You're right. I agree with that. You're right.
I don't think you'll fall over dead, but if you over a long period, it's really rough on your psyche.
It's very rough.
Yeah.
And I had me one. The guy named Sean Mims. He was
a friend. Good.
I had a friend.
That's great. That's all you really need is a friend.
Except I snitched on him and got his ass indicted.
Well, fuck.
Right. All right. But all of us were really big on adopting that heat type of philosophy, or
at least in theory,
or that Godfather philosophy. We used to quote that Godfather line, Kate, don't ask me about my business. All right. All of us used to quote that. Now, did that mean we actually followed that shit? No. So the idea was there, but in practice, far, far different.
So in Heat, since we're talking about Heat, I'll talk about Heat all day long. I love that movie. But I think one of the reason that it wasn't 30 seconds, and if you look at the end of the movie, it is like about a minute of him, of like screen time of him not running away, or well over 30 seconds. He's just looking at her, and he can run, and he's looking at her, and he could run, and it's much more than 30 seconds. Although it's funny because it seems like less, but if you actually time it, it's more. But it's about her. It's really not about him. It has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do with her. And he actually does love her too much for the situation he's in. He's imperiled himself. In your case, it's almost the opposite. Like did you get too comfortable with her? You just like, now it became more of an abusive relationship as opposed to the kind of relationship you would have if it were the most idyllic, like we are just friends and we love each other. And
with Susan, it was that, and my sister used to say it. I mean, people who were around me would say it, that I always treated her like a princess, that she was always on a pedestal, always. Mm-hmm. All right. And absolutely treated her like that. Absolutely did. And I think it was the ideal over more than just, the practicum of things. This is what I wanted things to be. This is the way I wanted it to be. And if I would, even though I'm this fuck nut of a criminal that victimizes people, that not a good guy at all, I try to tell myself I am, but I'm not. Even if I'm like that, as long as I treat her like this, she will accept that, and she will be there for me, and she will love me, even though I'm doing this, much like my mom used to do.
And you were telling yourself that you were a good guy through this process because you were taking care of her.
Right. All right. Now, with Elizabeth, the stripper girlfriend, that changes to a degree. Okay? At that point, I put on the cape and glasses and become Captain Sabaho all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. All right? Because she had problems. And I fancied myself as being able to solve those problems.
So you had a bit of the Jesus syndrome.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that had something to do with your mother in the sense that you wish you could have saved her from herself?
Maybe.
No, I mean, I'm asking. I'm not putting words in your mouth.
I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I've never. Certainly, Elizabeth was toxic. No doubt about that. Not if it would have worked out, it wouldn't have worked out.
Okay.
All right. There was no way that we should have ever been with each other at all. All right. Different age groups, different generations, different goals. I mean, just did not really mesh at all, other than our likes of music. And both of us were very broken people in our own specific ways at that point. All right. With Elizabeth, what happens is I really got involved with her far too early after the breakup with Susan. All right. So I'm going through that, I'm at the house walking around in a daze, realize I'm getting suicidal, and had enough of, realized it enough that I knew I had to do something about it. So called a psychologist, called this woman and crying to her on the phone, telling her about it. She's like, come in today. So go in, see her for about 4 months, which was not nearly fucking long enough. she's trying to get me to stop breaking the law, going to real estate, and I keep telling her, hey, is there a difference between the two? And because I'm a smartass. But what happens is I had never, I told you before we came in here, I tried my first DMT experience. All right. I didn't start drinking until I was 34 years old. Don't use drugs. Don't do any bullshit like that. And the reason why is because my mom did, and I didn't want to be like that. I always wanted to be in control of things. Okay. And that's one of the reasons that Shadow
Was that
Creek,
like your dad?
No, my dad was never really in control of anything at all.
No, I mean, in the sense where he didn't drink.
Yeah, dad would drink, but not a lot. I mean, every now and then you'd see him, he'd go on a bender, like once every 5 years. All right.
Okay, so not a regular drinker.
No. But with me, it was like, I want to be in control, period. I don't want to lose control. I don't want to be like my mom. I want to be in control of things. And that's one of the reasons that Shadow Crew is able to be as successful as it is, because by God, I'm going to control every fucking thing here.
And you were being sober about it, both literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. So 34, I start to drink. Susan leaves, and I'm like, fuck it. Why not? I was a big fan of Lebowski. So my drink of choice was the White Russian. So I start to drink all of a sudden. And I see this psychologist for about 4 months. Had never been to a strip club before. And
Wait. How did you find a psychologist?
Yellow Pages.
I know, but what got you there? Was it because of the breakup? You were feeling suicidal?
Broke up with Susan, was getting suicidal. I was like, got to do something.
Okay, all right.
And called the psychologist, told her all that. She's like, come in, see her for about 4 months. And
how'd that go?
Looking back, I think she did some good.
Oh, good.
Not nearly enough. All right, but I would go in. It got to the point I'd walk in, and she had already have the box of tissues for me. And I'd just go in there and start fucking bawling, twice a week. And
so you're getting something out of it.
Yeah. I was working through some stuff,
You have a lot to work through.
A lot.
I don't think 4 months is going to cut it, buddy.
No, it doesn't. So what happens is...
Are you back in therapy?
I'm not. My therapy's online these days.
I'd recommend maybe...
People tell me that.
Maybe doing it anyway.
But there's a, if anybody that watches... like that Brett Johnson show that I've got, I go into a lot of deep and dark places and work it out online in front of people and all that.
Yeah, dude, but
I know.
There's something, I'm not saying that there's no value in that. I am not saying that. And I'm glad you have something. So I'm really glad. But there's also something to be said about somebody who's kind of helping you think through the process and holding you accountable to your bullshit.
Yeah.
Not just...
Because there is some bullshit.
The internet crowds, the trolls are going to hold you accountable, but in a different sort of way.
Right.
And they're also not going to sort of baby you along in places where you possibly need a little bit of babying, because they're just like, oh, fuck that guy. He's like a pussy or whatever. Like, come on, give a guy a break. I think it might be beneficial to.
And you're not the first one that said that. It's my first cousin, the counselor. She tells me that.
As you said, you were crying every other day, whatever, every time you went in.
I'd go in and just bawl like a baby, man.
Yeah, so there's clearly some utility there.
Yeah,
I think it'd be worth my 2 cents.
And I appreciate it. Truly, I do. So I see her for about 4 months, and at that point, I start trying to develop friendships.
That's
so
good.
I sign on to some theater acting classes and start building friendships with the
That's great.
director and all that, and get lonely and get horny, and I'd never been to a strip club before, and I was like, fuck, why not? So
On a whim?
Yeah. I figured I could get, I didn't know what strip clubs were.
Did you go in with somebody, or you go?
No, just me. The idea was I'm going to get laid. That was the idea. I had no idea what a strip club was. I figured, hell, get laid in there. But walked in, and it was a place called Joe's Roundup. They had 2 fucking strippers in there. That's all they had. And Elizabeth was one of them. So walked in, and I bellied up at the bar, and come to find out they didn't have liquor. They had beer. So
no White Russians.
Yeah, no White Russians. So we had a drink of beer. And Elizabeth comes up to me, and she's like, do you want to buy a drink? Well, I didn't understand that. For strippers, drinks are $30 a pop.
Obviously.
So bought that, and she's like, well, if you want to go in the back and talk. And I was like, how much is that? Well, that's $400 for a bottle of Corbel. I was like, okay, we'll do that. So they go back
worth
and
every penny.
Worth every penny. And it's not, no sex. We go back there and we talk for 3 hours because, and that's one of the things I find out later on is a lot of men, they go to strip clubs for therapy.
It's about the same cost as therapy.
That's it. About the same cost, except, you don't get a professional.
Right.
You just get somebody that's going to listen to you. Mm-hmm. So, talked to her for about 3 hours. And during that point in time, she's sizing me up. Where do you live? She's looking at my watch. What kind of car you drive? All that bullshit. Sizing me up. Leave.
That's awfully forward. Yeah. And that wasn't an indicator to you at all?
Nah, I'm
all your
naive,
social engineering?
Naive dipshit here.
All your social engineering. You did not see. Okay. All right.
So come back a week later.
This reminds me of something a friend of mine said. He said, sales guys are the easiest people to sell to.
And fraudsters are the easiest people to get ripped off. I've been ripped off many times by other fraudsters and just chalked it up as a cost of doing business. And you would usually bring those guys back into the fold at that point. Yeah. You're good. Come on in. You be a good one. So I walk back in a week later and ask her out for dinner, and she agrees. And therein develops a relationship. And the problem is that, like I said, I really started seeing her way too soon after Susan.
Sure. Because
she replaced Susan for me. I convinced myself within a matter of weeks, I love the shit out of this woman.
This is 4 months later?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I love the shit out of this woman, move her in with me, find out she's addicted to cocaine. Not only addicted, but prostituting herself to support the habit. And because I've convinced myself I'm madly in love with her, I could fix her. And cut off contact with all friends that I'd been building.
Why? Why do that? That's interesting.
Yeah. So it got to the point I didn't want to leave her. Why do you have
to leave her to have a friend?
I did not trust her enough to leave her at the house. I thought she'd, go back to coke or whatever.
Bring her with. So why not?
She didn't want to leave. And a lot of it was an excuse on my part, to be fair with you. I just didn't want to leave her. And I remember Heather. Heather was a friend of mine. She finally has enough of that shit. She'd been trying to call me on the phone. I wouldn't answer the phone or anything else. So she shows up at the door one morning, bang, 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 bang. Ugh, what the fuck's going on? So I get Heather on the front porch, and we're talking, and I was like, whatever it takes to fix her is exactly what the fuck I'm going to do. And I remember Heather looked at me. She's like, you can't fix people, Brett. And I was like, whatever it takes to fix her is exactly what I'm going to do.
Did you know that you were saying something was completely impossible and bullshit?
No, I thought I could. I thought, shit, Brett Johnson can do anything.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can do anything.
So it was a bit of naivete as well as the Jesus complex at the same time. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So she stops using coke after I had threatened and was about to follow through with a breakup. So she stops using coke, quits her job. Questionable as to why. Maybe the Mr. Moneybags here. But she did reach out to me a couple years ago and said that she did love me at that point. So whether that's true or not, who the fuck knows?
She didn't love you?
She said she did.
Did?
That's what she said.
Okay.
So
I'll take you at her word.
Yeah. But she had very expensive taste. I had laundered most of my money over to Estonia at that point. So I had a nest egg in stateside. Went through that pretty quickly because up until that point, I lived a very circumspect life. I didn't eat out at expensive restaurants. I had a Mini Cooper for a vehicle. So nothing really expensive. Even the house was just a ranch-style house that I had.
Living like Warren Buffett.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't, it wasn't gaudy at all. Yeah. But when I met her, that changed. It became, $10,000 parties on the weekends. Bullshit like that all of a sudden. $1,000 shoes every week, $2,500 purses. Every meal was at an expensive restaurant because you're in Charleston, some of the best food in the United States. So every fucking meal was, $300-$500. So needless to say, go through all that money pretty quickly. At about the same time, that Shadow Crew makes the front cover of Forbes, then Shadow Crew gets busted. Now, I've quit Shadow Crew, but I've went through, I'm committing tax fraud. Tax season ends in October. You can't file taxes from October until mid-January, late January. So tax season ends, Shadow Crew gets busted, I'm out of fucking money. Elizabeth is wanting engagement rings from Tiffany's and wedding bands from Tiffany's, and that is pretty fucking expensive. So I start running because now I don't know who to trust online anymore. Can't do tax fraud, can't do credit card fraud because the feds have busted everybody. The only thing I can do is check fraud. So I start running paper in Charleston. Now, the problem is that when you're running paper, you need to do that shit on the road.
Right. Not in your hometown.
Not in your hometown.
Right.
I don't want to leave Elizabeth, and she doesn't want me to fucking leave either. So I start running paper locally using buying cash on, not cash, but collect on delivery. So COD orders for bullion, coin collections, diamond rings, shit like that. That goes on for about 3 months. So February 8th of 2005, Shadow Crew's already been busted. I've already, our wedding date is February 26, 2005. So February 8th, 2005, I've got 2 wedding bands coming in from Tiffany, COD order. And little did I know that it's a controlled delivery on me. So, yeah, so it's FBI, Charleston PD, about 30 of them in the parking lot.
How did they find you? I mean, specifically.
So what happens is Shadow Crew gets busted, all right? My second in charge, a guy named Kim Taylor, I had banned him from Shadow Crew because he was really fucking up. He had gotten people arrested. He was, so what happens is a guy named David Thomas went by the screen name of El Mariachi. He was on the run for check fraud out of Nebraska. He comes to Shadow Crew and says, hey, I'm broke, I need help. We take up a collection for the guy, send to him. After that collection, he and I become kind of internet friends. I start looking out for him. He's like, hey, I need a job. I get him a job with one carter. He doesn't like that. So I had this guy named Big Buyer, who was a Ukrainian. Big Buyer says, hey, I'll work with him. So Big Buyer sends David enough money to move from Texas at that point up to Issaquah, Washington, set up shop, open up a temporary office space. The deal is Big Buyer was going to use stolen credit card details to order high-priced goods, have them shipped to David. David was going to fence them on eBay, 80% of retail, split the money 50-50 between Big Buyer and David. All right? So, dipshit goes to Issaquah, opens up that temporary office space. Big Buyer hits Outpost.com. One order, first order, $18,000, the largest order that Outpost.com had ever had at that point in time.
Ouch.
Order goes through.
Okay.
They ship the goods. David gets all the loot, takes it back to his hotel. Him and his girlfriend take it back to his hotel. He's bragging about it, all right? My second in charge, Kim Taylor, he worked at the Tattered Cover bookstore out of Denver, Colorado, all right?
During the day.
During the day, midnight, at night, he's moonlighting as a fraudster.
Uh-huh.
He hears about David. He gets with me on ICQ. I want to go to Issaquah, make some money. I was like, you're making fucking money. He's like, no, I want to go to Issaquah. I'm like, dude, go, be fucking careful. So he gets in his fucking Saturn, drives to Issaquah from Denver, all right? Gets to Issaquah. Now the way credit card fraud used to work, you'd have the login for the credit card, all right? So you'd order your MacBook Pros or whatever the fuck you were ordering. You'd have them shipped to a drop address. The day of delivery, you'd wake your happy ass up of a morning, you'd sign on to that credit card account. If you could sign on, you'd go get your stuff. If you couldn't sign on, that meant the bank knew it was fraud and they'd close the account down and you went back to sleep that morning, all right? So David and Kim, when Kim gets there, they party all night. Now, Big Buyer, meanwhile, he's put in a second order. The second order with Outpost.com, this time for $16,000, the second largest order that Outpost.com had ever seen at that point in time. Going to the exact same address, different name, different credit card number, everything else. Outpost says that looks a hell of a lot like fraud.
Yeah, no kidding.
Outpost calls Issaquah PD. Issaquah PD says, hey, can you ship some empty boxes? They're like, yeah, we can do that. Shut the account down. David and Kim party all night long. They don't sign into the account the next morning. About 10 a.m., Big Buyer's got me on the horn. Hey, where the fuck is David? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, I can't get hold of him. The account's closed down. They don't need to go and pick up these packages. Well, they go and pick up the packages. What happens is the office complex, David's got this old-ass Cadillac. So he's driving. Kim Taylor's in the passenger seat. David's girlfriend, I think her name was Bridget, is in the back seat. They pull into the parking lot. As they pull in, David sees this van. And in the van, someone's sitting, except the way they're sitting sideways, looking out the driver's door. And David looks at Kim and says, that is an undercover agent. Kim says, nah. So they pull on up. Kim's like, I'll go in and get the packages. So Kim walks in, looks at the guy behind the counter. I think you've got some packages for me. Guy's like, hold on just a second. He walks behind the counter. Out pops Issaquah PD. Arrest Kim. David sees this shit going. So David floors it.
Oh, Jesus.
Of course, the chase ensues.
Yeah, right.
They arrest him on the interstate. Mm-hmm. David had fake IDs on him. Now, what we used to teach, and this is this idea between, theory and practice, far different. So we used to teach, if you're working with fake IDs, you do not have your real ID in the same fucking wallet.
Right.
That's a mistake.
Yep.
He's got his real ID in the wallet. So they arrest him, find out he's got outstanding warrants. Because of that, we could not bond David out. Kim didn't have any outstanding warrants. So we bonded his ass out. I get his ass shipped to Utah, where I had a guy that did fake IDs. And I was like, stay with him, camp out for a while. So he's with, this guy's name was Midhack. Midhack was married. So Midhack's housing Kim Taylor. About 3 weeks later, Midhack calls me. Hey, you got to get rid of this fucking guy. I was like, what's going on? He's like, man, the only thing this fucking guy is doing is he sits there all day long and he's popping ecstasy over and over and over. And I'm like, what? Well, I had this rule. Hey, we don't use fucking drugs. Dipshit here didn't realize that everybody on the fucking forum was using some type of fucking drug at that point.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I'm like, get the fuck out of there. So he goes back to Denver, where I had another crew that was coming from LA going out to Savannah. He gets up with them. They're staying at a Marriott. What does this fucking idiot do? He starts running payroll checks, starts printing out counterfeit payroll checks, taking them to Safeway, using the payroll check to buy Marriott gift cards, and then using the stolen Marriott gift cards to pay the Marriott hotel bill that he's staying at. Takes about 3 weeks for law enforcement to put those together and arrest everybody at that point in time. Because of that, I boot Kim Taylor off of Shadow Crew. All right. Albert Gonzalez comes in because they really wanted to give him some fucking time. Albert Gonzalez comes in after I quit. Now that leads up to me quitting Shadow Crew at that point. All this shit was going on. I do these mass bannings, and you can find this stuff on the Wayback Machine now, where Gollum Fund bans all these individuals. I banned like 80 or 100 people in one day. All right. So did these mass bannings right as I'm leaving, announced, hey, this is everything that's going on. I fucking quit. All right. Albert comes in and lets all these people back in because he wants to arrest them all. So Shadow Crew makes front cover of Forbes. I get arrested after that. Secret Service starts to run me as a confidential informant at that point. What happens is I was arrested 3 weeks before I was supposed to be married to Elizabeth. She had no idea what the fuck I was doing. I told her I was a fraud consultant. That was my joke. I'm a fraud consultant. I just don't tell you on which side of the fraud equation I'm on.
Of course.
So I go to pick up these wedding bands. They've got a controlled delivery. What had happened was Kim, when he comes back in, he knew my real name. So he mentions it on the forums. So when they shut down Shadow Crew, they get the database, and there's Brett Johnson on there. The problem was I was not living under the Brett Johnson name. in Charleston. Yeah, I was using the Brett Johnson name, but the house and everything else was under this Joshua Kaplan name, so they couldn't find where the fuck I was, but they knew I was out there. Meanwhile, they see this guy running paper prolifically in Charleston, and they're like, wonder if that's Brett Johnson. Well, it was. So they do a controlled delivery, catch me at that point in time. All right. Secret Service comes in. It was FBI and Charleston PD who got me. Within an hour and a half, Secret Service comes in, takes over the investigation. What happens is this FBI agent, Cynthia McCants, they've got me, they're interrogating me. She's got this folder. She opens up the folder, takes out this piece of paper, slides it across the table. Does that look familiar? And it's a picture of a fake ID that I've used. And I'm like, yeah, it looks like me, just a little bit heavier. As soon as I say that, door pops open. These two Secret Service guys come in. We'd like to talk to you about some stolen credit cards and take over the investigation at that point. They let me sit in the county jail for, I think, 10 days. 2 more agents fly in from New Jersey, pull me out of the cell, and they look at me and said, we got your laptop. I'm like, yeah. Got anything on your laptop? I'm like, yeah. Well, you're going to be charged for everything that's on it. And I'm like, I figured that. Mm-hmm. Then they look at me and it's like, anything you can do for us? Well, shit, I was supposed to be married in 3 weeks. And I loved the shit out of that girl. I did. And I looked at him and I was like, my exact words were, you let me get back with Elizabeth, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And he looked at me and was like, we're going to get you out. I'm like, good. They let me sit there for 3 months to get a taste of it. And
was that also potentially to make it look like you weren't working with them, just to hold on to you just a little bit too long?
No, no one knew I'd been arrested.
Oh, okay.
It was not announced in the press, anything else like that. Nobody knew it. And that's the problem. And these days, when you're working with an informant, you don't want them to go missing. And back then, you didn't want them to go missing either. So on the dark web, if you're on Dread, if you're on Telegram, you get one of these guys that goes missing. If they're missing for a while, that's a fucking problem. Mm-hmm. And it was with me too. That's a fucking problem. Or
they've done their time and they didn't blab and
right.
They're out. So it can go either way.
Except we know everybody talks. Everybody talks.
Oh, okay.
Right. Everybody fucking talks.
Really?
So they let me sit there for 3 months.
No honor amongst thieves.
None. Especially with cybercrime. Everybody fucking talks. Mm. So they get me out after 3 months. And what happens is first phone call, my sister pays my bond. It was a $327,000 bond. Secret Service reduces it to gets it reduced to $1,000. Denise pays the $1,000. Do I call Denise? Fuck no. I call Elizabeth. Hey, I'm out. She's like, I'll be there. It's like, okay. So it's 11 o'clock midnight. I'm standing in the parking lot of the jail with a Secret Service agent. Elizabeth, she had a friend that owned a limo company, pulls up in a fucking limo, gets out, pops the trunk, gets these 2 plastic storage containers with my clothes in them, drops them in the parking lot, comes over, hugs me, call me later, gets back in the car, bugs out. I'm sitting there crying like a baby.
Why? What did she... Like, call me later as in, like, when you get your life in order? Or
Fuck, who knows? At that point, who knew? The only thing I knew was, fuck, I'm distraught. I was crying like a baby. Secret Service guy, he looks at me, he's like, is that your fiance? I'm like, yeah. He's like, man, I am so sorry. I'm like, yeah. So what was the limo part about? She had a friend that owned a limo company, and I guess that was just, what the fuck. But yeah,
weird scene.
So
I'm like playing this in my head like a Hollywood movie. I'm like, what happened there? Like, it's like nonsensical.
Yeah. So
like some writer didn't get their script
some
right.
Shit going on there. So I had $30 to my name. That's all I had. Secret Service agent. He pays for my hotel that night, and he pays for my dinner that night. Got me some Hardee's. Soon as he leaves, I take my $30, walk my happy ass to Walmart, and buy a prepaid debit card so I can start back in tax fraud.
Okay, why?
Why the fuck not?
Because...
Didn't have any money. I was like, gotta have money. And then I called Elizabeth as soon as I got back from Walmart.
Yeah, but why not do something good with your life? I mean, why immediately pivot back?
What else are you going to do?
I don't know. I don't know.
No. And here's the thing. All right. So thinking through that, and I've not really done that, But thinking through that.
That was a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
It's kind of an important one.
But what the fuck am I going to do at that point? I'm going to jail. Yeah, I'm out right now, but I'm going to fucking prison. There's no doubt about that. All right? So what do you do at the end of the day? Now, I've lost Elizabeth. Now, I do call her and she comes back, all right, after I beg and tell her everything's going to, lie to her and tell her everything's going to be all right, that I'm the new Frank Abagnale guy. That's the line. You've seen that movie, Catch Me If You Can. It's going to be a lot like that. They've said everything's going to be fine. They're paying me, everything else. No, they're not fucking paying me. I didn't know they were going to pay me at that point. The only thing I knew is I'm going to steal me some fucking money and get everything back again, is what I did. All right, so did that, convinced her that everything's going to be fine, lied to her like a fucking dog. She's like, yeah, we'll give it another chance. So she had been working as a dental hygienist, got her to quit that job. They moved me from Charleston to Columbia, South Carolina, where the field office is. And I was working 4 to 6 hours a day there. And when I wasn't working there, I was filing tax returns. Still in about anywhere from 30 to 60K a week on that.
Okay, but why?
Why the fuck not?
I don't know. Why? You start with there.
I mean, honestly, I can't answer that question.
Was it purely a dopamine thing, like a rush?
Oh, man,
Was
no.
Was it trying to pay for a lifestyle still? Like,
I mean, even so they were paying me $350 a week, and they were paying the rent, and the money went into purses and dinners,
lifestyle,
and shoes. Is where the money went to.
So you were still addicted to her, it sounds like.
And what happens is I'd been to a strip club twice, and she had always wanted me to go to strip clubs. She always wanted to go back to them. And after I got arrested and came back, I gave in to that. So we started going to strip clubs on the weekend, spending money there. And
that'll add up fast.
Oh, yeah. So about 3-4 months into that, she looks at me, and one night we're driving home, and she's like, I think it'd be really funny if you'd get a blowjob from another stripper. And that fucking ended it right there. That was that cheating line in the sand, you know. And so my dating pool became strip clubs. And she found out that I was, dating other strippers. And she asked me one day, she's like, why don't you just tell me that it's over? And I looked at her and I was like, it's fucking over. So loaded up her stuff and took her back to Charleston, South Carolina, and really went off the fucking deep end at that point. So it became every night that I'd take, $4,000-$6,000 of cash in to a strip club, hand a wad of 20s to the bartender, then make a table full of kamikazes. I'd drink until 2 or 3 o'clock until I closed everything down, then went home with whatever stripper would go home at that point, and continue to spiral down, then go back into the office, 4 o'clock of an afternoon, rinse and repeat. And just...
It was self-destructing.
Oh, yeah, just fell apart at that point. Yeah. And so what happened with...
And that's partly because you knew you were going to jail as well.
Oh, yeah, they told me that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a thing. And the thing was, Robert, I mean, these were good men. They were. But they knew I needed to go to prison, too. They knew I was a fuck. But they were good men. I mean, they fucked up, first in trusting me, but then they...
Was this something maybe your mom influenced there? Like
they didn't know how to handle back then, and they did the same thing with Albert and some of the other guys that they were running as informants too. They did not understand who they were dealing with. All right, they likened us to those regular street criminals and the counterfeiters that they had been dealing with. They did not understand that we really have problems with authority. And they did not understand that we are really
That's
good.
the reason I could have never been in the military. Like,
right. But they also didn't really appreciate the degree of how sophisticated we were with being social engineers.
Right.
That we're always manipulating, that we're always looking for those things. All right. So you know, and they opened those doors as well. I mean, they were good men. They gave me the chance. I just didn't take it, you know, and like.
Is that just you were too sad? I mean, with the breakup and the pending.
Too sad. I won't say sad. What got me more depressed than anything was Elizabeth and then Sean Mims. So what happens with Sean, he was that real friend that I had. And I had told Sean that if I ever disappeared and came back, do not fucking contact me. Made that clear with him. Well, I disappeared for 3 months. Come back, he gets with me the same fucking day he sees me online. Meanwhile, 2 Secret Service agents are sitting there, and they're like, who's this guy? So I'm like, it's this guy. So they start following him, build a case against him, everything else. Well, when they finally got the case, when they identified him and everything, that's when I really start going overboard with the drinking at that point. Just fucking blasting
because you were hurting your one good friend.
Yeah. He was the guy, and he had never done a damn thing to hurt me. When Susan had left, he was calling me like every other day. Are you okay? Let's talk through everything. Everything's all right. Bam, bam, bam. He had even been in Phuket when the damn tsunami hit, and had been calling me from Phuket at that point in time. So I mean, he was a good guy, and I fucked the guy over. All right, and he wasn't the only guy that I fucked over. But it mattered. It mattered with him because he had tried to help me, and went overboard at that point in time. Then of course.
Okay, so you're completely blowing up your one friendship. I mean, psychologically, that's going to destabilize you, and you're breaking up at the same time, or approximately within a month of each other or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you feel like it was possible to resurrect a friendship like the one you'd had, or possible to have a relationship like the one you had, or better potentially? Hopefully?
Oh, no.
You're just like, it's over.
Done.
It's over.
Yeah. So you
were probably contemplating suicide, I would assume, at this point again.
Not suicide. I hadn't gotten suicidal at that point, but I started to not give a shit.
It was just don't give a fuck.
Right. So
like your life's already fucked. Who gives a shit?
So with taxes, didn't give a shit. All right. So I didn't mind using instead of a burner phone, using my phone to check account balances, shit like that. I was like, fuck it, let's do it. So started doing stupid shit all of a sudden. All right. So what happens is, this was around March 16th of 06. They had an operation called Operation Rolling Stone, and they were arresting like 9 or 11 people nationwide. And one of the ones they were arresting was Sean. Okay.
Wait, hold on. Sorry. I don't, it's not that I don't believe you, but I feel like, yes, you may not have been suicidal, but you were doing suicidal things.
Yes.
You were putting yourself in much more harm's way than you needed to. And you just told me that.
Right.
That is self-destructive behavior.
Oh, I'll agree, self-destructive, but I was not suicidal.
It's true, but it's, boy, they're kissing cousins, right? I mean, they're very close, because what you're basically saying is, I am willing to blow up my life or have other people blow up my life because I don't care. But that's like that far away from just pulling the trigger.
I'd agree.
Right?
I agree with that.
Okay. All right. I just want to get on the same page.
I agree.
Okay. You were
very
at the very, very end of mental stability.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that is like March, is late March is when this was of 06. Operation Rolling Stone pops in. They arrest Sean. Next day they come in. We need you to take a polygraph test. I was like, I'm not taking a polygraph test. Call my fucking lawyer. So they get my lawyer on the phone, and they're like, my lawyer's like, well, you don't have to take the polygraph. And I was like, well, good, I'm not going to. He's like, but they're going to violate you if you don't take the polygraph. And I was like, okay, so what do I do? He's like, well, have you done anything? And I was like, yes. And he was like, well, you could always try to pass the polygraph. And I'm like, okay. So
did you like stay up all night reading about how to pass polygraphs?
Oh no, I didn't even know it was happening. So they get me in the office, and they don't fucking let me leave. Polygraph.
Oh, right? Like today's the day.
Today's the day.
I see. So
come to find out, what had happened was they arrested Sean. When they arrested Sean, he was in an apartment in L.A. The apartment manager comes out and says, hey, don't know what's going on here, but last night, Sean had a U-Haul here, loaded the entire fucking thing up with stuff, and left with it. And come to find out, that was all the evidence that they needed to prosecute Sean. So they come back with me, hey, why don't you take a polygraph for us? So,
but you hadn't actually told him.
I had not.
Interesting. So they nailed you on all the other crimes you were doing.
So what they did was ask 3 questions. Have you contacted the press? Well, I had. I'd been talking to Tom Zeller out of the New York Times. All right.
Is that illegal?
No.
Okay.
But they had told me not to.
Okay.
Right? But I'd been doing it anyway because I fancied myself as this Frank Abagnale guy. I need a book and all this other bullshit. So I was doing that shit anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was one question. Next question was, have you been using a computer outside of the office? And then the final question.
And that is not allowed.
That is not allowed.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah. Final question. Have you warned anyone of any investigations that's taking place? I hadn't. All right. Hadn't. So.
But you're probably still going to fail that because you're thinking about the time you did alert somebody about the possibility
right.
in the future.
And the thing is
got a
that
canary out
when
there.
they tell you that you failed the polygraph test, they don't tell you which fucking questions you failed.
Yeah.
All right. So you failed. So I'm sitting there arguing with them, everything else. I didn't fail. Over the course of a couple of hours, the polygraph examiner, he bugs out. Jim Ramacone, he's the second in charge in South Carolina. Him, Bobby Kirby, Brad Smith, they're there. They're circled around. And it's like, we know you've done something. What have you done? So I admit I've talked to the press. All right. I figure if small admission, that will give them something to go on. Everything will be fine.
Sure.
I've talked to the press. Well, why the fuck did you talk to the press? That's all I've done. I've talked to the press. I just thought I needed to get a job when I get out and blah, 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 blah. We want to search your apartment.
Uh-oh.
I was like, now in my apartment, I've got a laptop, I've got cash, I've got prepaid debit cards, and I've got lists of fucking stolen identities. All right. So
that you're planning to give them for obvious reasons.
Oh yeah. So and it's Bobby and Brad that wants to search. That's going down to search. All right.
At that point, you just admit it because who cares? Really?
So I'm like, they can search. I go with them though. And they're like, okay. Now here's what had been happening. I had been breaking the law from inside the Secret Service offices by that point in time. All right. What had happened was, as you go in, they had me on a laptop hooked up to a plasma monitor on the wall, outside line. Next to me was their desktop computer, outside line. 2 agents in the room, 1 South Carolina agent in the room at all times. All right. They had Spectre Pro on the machine, Camtasia on the machine. So screenshots and key logging at the same time. Everything goes on a DVD on a spindle at the end of the night. First 2 weeks, they're diligent as hell. Asking questions, paying attention to everything. Now, when I'm doing this stuff, I'm really fast. I've got multiple screens open, bouncing between everything else. So they're really diligent the first 2 weeks. They get tired of that shit after 2 weeks.
Yeah, sure.
They start watching porn after 2 weeks.
Obviously, Secret Service should be watching porn in the office. Why not?
So, and I'm feeding into it, paying attention to it, doing everything, and they thought that, hey, this guy's a good guy. He's towing the line. Probably the only thing he's done is he's talked to the press. So Bobby, Brad escort me to the apartment. We walk in. As soon as we walk in, now my shit is in the bedroom, in the wardrobe closet. As soon as we walk in, Bobby's like, I'm going to take the kitchen and the living room. Brad's like, I'll check the bedroom. We get to the bedroom. I look at Brad. I was like, do you want to see my porn collection? And he's like, you got some? I was like, yeah, man, you want to see it? He's like, yeah. So I start showing him the discs and everything, and that's what he spends his time on. The rest of the stuff, he just does a cursory check, looks in the closet, lifts some clothes up. That's all he does. Well, I've got stuff hanging in clothes and pants pockets where I've got the shit. So he doesn't check that stuff. So they leave, but they don't let me go home. Because by that point in time, they're like, we're violating this guy. He's done something. We're sending his ass back to jail. All right? So they don't let me leave that night. Now, I've got this shit in the apartment. I can't leave it in the apartment. I know something's going to happen. Next morning, they violate me. They take me back to Charleston, South Carolina, throw me into jail. I start trying to get on the phone, get somebody in there to get the shit out of the apartment.
Right.
Meanwhile, they've decided they're going to do a more thorough check of the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
They find the cards, find the money, find all that. Now, what happens is, and again, I said these were good men, and they were. I mean, they fucked up with the porn and by trusting me too much. But what happens is, because they didn't do a thorough check that first time, Bobby loses his fucking job. He works now at the VA. Brad, it originally says that Brad lost his job, but Brad is still a Secret Service agent today. I don't know what happened with him. Bobby ends up losing his job, goes to work for the VA. I was able to...
Do you feel bad about that?
Yeah, man. What happened was this is either 2018. I was doing this anglerfish podcast where I was going through my story and I was bringing people in and stuff to interview. And I was in Utah, a guy named Aaron Sherman, former FBI agent. I was interviewing with him, talking about my story, and I was talking about this with Bobby and Brad. And after the show, he looks at me, he's like, look, man, he's like, I can look him up if you want me to, if you want to call him. I was like, man, yeah, if you don't mind doing that. So he gives me Bobby's number, and I got up with Bobby. And Bobby, I was in Birmingham. I live in Birmingham. Bobby's in South Carolina. And Bobby's like, man, if you ever want to have lunch, and if you're in the area or anything, let me know. We'll sit down and have lunch and talk about it. And I was like, shit, man, I'll be there next week if you want to do it. And drove out to South Carolina, had lunch with him. And he told me, he's like, we thought we were your friends. We really thought that. And he's like, that's why we didn't search the place. And he's like, that's what got us in trouble at that point, was that. And I was able to tell him how sorry I was. And the dude looked at me, man, and I was like, dude, I'm really trying to be a better guy these days. And he looked at me, he's like, he said, Brett, you were always a good guy. You just didn't know it back then. And that hit, man. That hit right there. But
was he right?
I don't know. I know that I know he was a good guy, and I know that he and Brad tried their damnedest to help me, and I just didn't do it, and that bothers me. Somebody that I'm on the good guy side of the fence these days, and somebody that takes the time out, like I've had time and chance again to turn my life around until it finally took hold. And for somebody like them to give you that chance and to believe in you, and meanwhile I'm sitting there being the asshole that's ripping them off and doesn't give a damn, there's something wrong with that, man. And that bothers me. These days I'm serious. I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn who I hurt. I'm going to say the shit that needs to be said, and I'm going to be truthful about things. I call out the criminals these days. I call out the companies that are fucking up these days. I lose contracts because of it. I piss people off because of it.
Probably deserve to.
But by God, I'm going to do the right goddamn thing these days. And I'm serious about that. And I'm serious about working hard to protect people from that guy I used to be.
If you double down on this, like you're already here. You're already in this space mentally. But if you double down on it again, it's going to actually be cathartic, where you actually can kind of come out the other side. There is redemption. It just sucks. It's like really,
it's
really
hard,
crappy. It's horrible. Because you first have to fully come to terms. This is a conversation I have with people sometimes who have been in really abusive relationships with their parents, or significant others. It can happen, but it's more often a parental situation where they have done like so many drugs, their teeth are falling out and their skin looks weird, and the thing. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then one day they decide they want to clean up their act, and they go clean, maybe they have every intention of doing the right thing. And then they look in the mirror And that is what's staring back at them. Like this, their teeth are gone, their eyes are sunk in, their hair's all gone, their track marks, and, they got diseases and, maybe some amputations from bad, situations.
Yeah.
This is not a good place to arrive and suddenly realize not only are you looking at this monster, you might have been a very handsome or a very beautiful person beforehand. Now you're a monster. And nearly every thing that has occurred since you started using has been awful. Yeah. It has been selfish and mean and vindictive rather, and cruel, and totally trying for an ends that really didn't matter at all. You didn't help anybody. You hurt every relationship that you've had. That's a really rough day. That is a really, really, really rough day.
Yeah.
And then deciding to continue, coming out of that and having that realization, and then saying, yes, I'm going to continue being a good person despite all of that. That's rough, man. That's really rough. But if they do it, they can be amazing people and they can help so many people because they have so much perspective. I think that's where you're at right now. You're finally looking at the monster in the mirror. Yeah. And it sucks. Well, it really fucking sucks.
Yeah, you can't make everything right, man.
No.
You can't do that.
No, but you can have redemption. It just doesn't come from anyone else. That's the problem.
Yeah.
No one's going to give it to you. You got to do it yourself. I can't help you do it.
Right.
I don't think anybody you hurt in your past can help you do it.
No, and I've been able to make some of those apologies. All right.
I bet it didn't help. It didn't fix it, did it?
It didn't. And sometimes I've not been able to make those apologies. Sometimes some people have not wanted to hear those apologies, and I can't. Goddamn, I can't blame them for that.
Right.
And then, like I said, when we first started talking, like that poor woman in that elevator.
Brett, why don't you start by just writing out your apology? Not talking to her, just write it out. Just put all the terrible things that led up to this situation, not apologizing for it, just what happened, and then how you got to where you are, and then start your apology. And just write it out. I think it would do you a ton of good to say it just as brutally, here's what happened, as you possibly can. And don't leave anything out. You could tear it up and throw it in the fire later, but just start there. I think it'd do you a lot of good.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, picking up the phone and doing it raw, it's not going to come out the way you want it. And you're not going to say it as elegantly as you can write it. It'll suck. I'm not saying it's going to be a good time, but I think it's the step you're missing here. You want to do it. You don't know how to do it. I think this is the first step.
It's just, you're right. It's just, I've ran from that for so long, and it's just, it started with my first cousin, that counselor I was telling you about, that broached the subject with me. And then this guy that I'm meeting with tomorrow, it's like the whole fucking universe is sitting there saying, by God, you need to do this. And it's right. I know that. And
but she's not going to give you the forgiveness you need, even if she says, I forgive you.
Nor should she.
But it can't come from her is the problem.
Right.
That's the problem. It always has to come from within you. Always. You decided to turn into a good person. She didn't make you a good person. You being her up didn't make you a good person eventually, the lessons and the pain that it's now producing. That's not what made you a good person. You just made the decision. That came from inside. Dude, I think you've already done the really hard part. The next part is just deciding you are going to do your own work inside. You should apologize to everybody. Yeah, of course you should. But that's more to make sure you've fully faced the monster. Because right now I don't think you fully faced it. You're facing it, but you haven't done that last little set of things that need to be done. But once you fully faced it, it's now the work really begins.
Right.
Right? You're this close. Just take the next extra couple steps and you're there, man.
You're right.
Like, I'm proud of you. I think you're getting close. You're getting really close.
I'm trying, man.
You sure? I know. And so that's why I'm saying you got to double down. Like, you're like there, you got to, it's like, fuck it, all in, you know? Like, you're already got a pretty good deck of cards. Now you go all in.
You're right.
Like, look how much better is your life now than it was 10 years ago.
You know, I
terrible, man.
Yeah.
And now you can talk openly. You can have friends. Are you making friends?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my next door neighbor, I made a comment on a podcast. He's my friend. He is. He made the comment, I don't have friends, you know, and the dude, and next day after he listened to the podcast, he's like, what the fuck, man? I'm your friend. And I'm like, yeah, I know, Ken, you are. So I do have friends. I do. It's,
have you thought about acting again?
I act out every time I'm on stage.
No.
No, I don't have time. I don't.
Yeah, you can make the time.
I don't. I wake up of a morning doing this, and I go to bed of a night doing this.
Okay.
And that's what I like, is that I like the idea of the thing with me.
Okay.
I
Is
would
this
love
performance as opposed to, because I think there was something about acting for you that was meaningful.
Oh yeah. You know, these days my performances on my shows, you know, I do these voices and characters, and I cut loose and all that. And when I'm on a stage giving a presentation, I have a lot of fun. I do a lot of catharsis as well.
Okay, so is that giving you the same feeling that acting did?
For the most part.
Okay, well, maybe that's close enough then.
You know, it's I will tell you this, Robert, I mean that when I say it. I am exactly where I am supposed to be right now.
Good.
There's not a doubt in my mind about that. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
Talking to me right this second? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, all of this together. What
does this do for you exactly? Like, it's catharsis in some weird way, but like, you could do this with 5 people in some coffee shop, smoking a cigarette and a dimly lit jazz session or whatever.
And
like,
I do.
Why here? Why podcasts?
No, the thing with me is me talking to you, the life that I used to have, you wouldn't give me the time of fucking day.
Negative. You're wrong, sir.
Maybe.
No.
But right now, I've got a point in my life where I lead such a life, a blessed life, that I am so fucking grateful to have, and I'm able to talk to people like you, and people hear me and see me and accept me. And that's the difference of everything.
So I disagree with one part in particular, is that I wouldn't have talked to you. That's not true. I have lots of people from all walks of life that are, frankly, some of them are, you know, bad actors, and I consider many of them to be, I would say, at minimum friends, if not even sometimes very good friends. And I don't look at people as cut and dry, I think, as most people do.
I appreciate that.
I don't think of them as good or bad. I use that as a shorthand just to describe, like, you probably shouldn't give all your credit card information to this person. You know what I mean? But not in the sense that I think that they're beyond redemption.
I appreciate that. But, you know, I get people from that grade school friends, people that knew me in grade school, that reach out to me and just to tell me how proud they are of me.
Well, they should be.
And, you know, ask questions, and I get people that I don't even fucking know, man, from Hazard, Kentucky, that will send me messages of, hey, man, I'm from Hazard, or hey, I'm from Eastern Kentucky, and by God, you're doing us proud, and just to come from who I was and the shit that I did, to have somebody that doesn't even fucking know me that takes the time out to send me a message like that. You know, you're making us proud. Here, keep doing what you're doing. That's why I do this shit every day.
Well, I've only known you from online, and I spent, almost 3 hours with you already. No, I'm saying, here I am. this is what I'm doing. I wouldn't have you on the podcast if I didn't think this was a very interesting conversation, and I'm proud of you.
I appreciate it.
Here I am, somebody you've never met before, saying it to your face.
I do.
And here's the thing. Look, if you went off and started doing terrible things tonight, you got in your rental and started hacking the shit or whatever at the barbecue place tonight, I wouldn't change my opinion of everything we've said so far. It's all true. It doesn't matter what happens from the future or what happened in the past. Today, here's where we are.
I appreciate that.
I think you suffer from the same thing I and many other people suffer from, which is I am not very present. You say active listening is a very useful trait in social engineering. So you're obviously able to turn it on, which is really good because that means you have the skill. You just need to keep it on.
That's probably true.
Because you're spending a lot of time in the past.
Yeah.
A lot of your mental cycles are spent on the past.
You're right.
Or in the future of what I could get or where I could go, right? But I think right now, like not just this second, obviously, but right now, the time where you can actually be like, fuck, I gotta have my life like now. Here's the moment. I had a former Navy SEAL, former governor of Missouri on the podcast. And one of the things he was talking about was like lifting the log, right? You know, and he's a philosopher as well. So I was talking about like, what the philosophical, like what kind of philosophical thing did you say or whatever? I kind of forget how to start the conversation, but he's like, no, man, fuck no. You can't do any of that shit. You just got to hold the goddamn log. If you're thinking about something distant in the future, some philosophical thing, you're going to drop the log. You just have to get past this evolution. That's where you're at right now. You just got to fucking hold that log.
I get that.
And that's now. I'm not saying you shouldn't stray in the past to get through the cathartic aspect of it, but then you have to be present.
I spent a lot of time in the past.
I know you do.
Yeah.
I know you do. But this is your homework, man. You gotta be much more now and a lot less in the past or in the future. You don't control those things.
Right.
You don't control those things. You want to control the future. You're spending all your time thinking about the past, but really, like, this is it right now. Every minute, every second is the thing you control. You're here. I mean, you did it. You made it. You made the right decisions to get here. I mean, not that my podcast is anything appreciable, but but I am saying that it's important that you made some decisions that were right, and you get to make the next decision. You get to decide every minute what kind of person you're going to be.
You're right. And
that's why I'm saying double down. Just keep making those same decisions. And you know it. You know when you're feeling like, fuck, I can do this, or this one's kind of slimy, but I'll do it anyway. I'll take that contract even though I shouldn't. Or right. I'll talk to this person about XYZ even though it's probably it's not good for me to do it. You know what I mean? Like, you know it. You feel it when you're doing that.
I do.
That's what I'm talking about. Just stop doing that shit.
I'm really hoping to get that fucking point where I can do that.
Yeah,
that's the thing, though. I mean,
once you got a taste for it, it's hard to.
The thing is, I mean, I'm really good about calling bullshit out.
Sure,
I am. And the thing is, and I tell Tom O'Malley's a prosecutor friend of mine. I tell him this all the time. I'm like, I'm really hoping to get to that point where I can do that to every fucking person that I need to be able to do that to.
You can.
So, yeah.
You can. And actually, it's just as simple as deciding to do it. It's just another one of those kind of left turn in Albuquerque sort of situations.
Yeah. I mean, right now, everyone already thinks I already do that, but I really don't.
I know you. I know you. Namaste. Really I see you, right? The light in me sees the light in you, or whatever. No, I get it. And I'm telling you, it's apparent to me. But not everyone's going to see this.
Right.
But I have been around enough people from enough walks of life. I know what I'm looking at.
I know he's got some bullshit going on.
But that is entirely up to you to decide to get past it. Entirely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then do you weigh it? Is it that abstract where you get to decide? No, I don't think so. I think
do it.
I think every minute of every day we get to decide, and every time we decide the opposite, it's got these ripple effects.
You're right.
I don't know, dude. Shit, I got a million other things we could talk about here. I'm just looking at my notes, man. We didn't even make it 1/3 of the way through.
It's a big story.
It's a big story.
Bunch of shit.
You know what? Why don't we spend just one more minute talking about one more thing,
Sure.
and then just stop, and then someday you'll come back and you'll tell the second half of this crazy
Let's
story.
do that. I like that.
Because frankly, I don't want to cut it short.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's not a story that it can be told well.
Yeah, we've not even talked about the prison experience yet.
I know. Look, I'm looking at my notes, but like I literally didn't make it 1/3 of the way through. I do think if you can briefly tell, because I think it'll be funny, a good note to end on is the prison break story. And I know this is out of order, but I think it's a good, funny, we can kind of land on a light note, and then we'll pause it, and then we'll redo this whenever you get some time.
All right. So I told you about my dad. He had, Jesus Christ, the prison break story.
I know it's hard to tell quickly, so.
Okay. So what happens is I go on the run. Okay. So ripping the Secret Service off, they find out about it. They revoke the bond. After they revoke the bond, Jim Ramacone, second in charge, he comes in they let me sit in the county jail for a week. He comes in with Bobby Kirby, pulls me out of the cell. He's like, he's got the Miranda waiver in front of him. He's like holding it right there. I'm sitting across the desk from him. He's like, look, you're going to tell me everything you've done the past 5 years, or I'm going to make it my mission in life to fuck over you and your family. Not just right now. Once you get out, I'll hound you the rest of your life. Slides a Miranda paper over at me. Now you want to talk to me? And I was like, I want a fucking lawyer. Well, Bobby gets all red. Jim jumps up, heads to the door. Fuck you, and that's federal prison for you. All right. So 2 weeks later, judge reinstates the bond. They had revoked the bond improperly. I was only under state charges at that point in time. Nobody calls the Secret Service to tell them I get out. So I walk out. My mom's waiting on me. I was like, I can't stay. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, if they're going to fuck me, they've got to find me. Well, I've been dating this stripper named Kim out of Augusta, Georgia. Called Kim up. I was like, Kim, I need $1,000. She's like, why do you need $1,000? I was like, look, I'll pay you back $3,000. I need $1,000. She's like, okay. So I meet her in Augusta in the Lowe's parking lot. She gives me $1,000. I hug her, tell her I love her. Head west on Interstate 20. No idea where the fuck I'm going to go to. Get to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. By that point in time, I realized I'm like, hey, man, there's a prepaid debit card supplier in Dallas. So go to Dallas, pick up 67 debit cards, and start committing tax return identity theft. That lasts for 4 months. Still $600,000 in the space of 4 months. Wind up the United States Most Wanted list. Go to Disney World. Yeah. Get arrested. They track me down using, back then it was called a triggerfish. These days it's a stingray. They track me using.
How though? How did they catch you?
So what happened is it's that idea of practice versus theory. Mm-hmm. Theory, when you're on the run, you don't contact any motherfucker that you've known. You change all your habits. You do everything else. All right. Now I had changed.
So who'd you call?
My mom. I had sent her a cell phone and like $3,000 in cash through FedEx. I knew they were doing USPS for checking.
Why are you contacting your mom?
Want to make sure she's all right. You know, didn't want to break those tags. So they intercepted the phone, used the phone, Triggerfish, to locate me in Orlando and find me. Now, Triggerfish, what it does is, even Stingray, what it does is it will find you within a 7-foot circle.
Right.
All right.
Yeah. Triangulation.
But not a vertical circle.
Sure.
All right. So I was in a timeshare on like the 3rd floor. They knew within that 7-foot radius where I was. They just didn't know which floor I was on. So September 16th, what happens is they go around knocking. All right. 10:30 in the morning, September 16th, 2006. I was used to the builders coming around because they were still building the timeshares. I was used to them coming around asking if everything was all right. So I'm sound asleep because I'd been, at Disney World the night before. So what happens is, hear this knock on the door, get up, go to the peephole, look out, nobody's there. Okay. Open the door, step out into the hallway, walking down the hall, Bobby Kirby, Orange County Sheriff, another Secret Service agent walking down the hall. They turn around, look at me. I'm like, hi, guys. They're like, hi, Brad. How are you? And I'm like, I'm good. Would you guys like to come in? And they're like, well, let's put you in cuffs first. And I was like, yeah, I figured.
Probably a good idea.
So they put me in
right?
cuffs, bring me in, sit me down on the sofa. Bobby looks at me. He's like, you got anything in the house? I was like, yeah, there's $150,000 cash in the closet in there. He's like, okay. So he starts to walk in there. I was like, plus there's an AK-47. He stops dead in his tracks. He's like, are you fucking kidding me? I was like, yeah, I am kidding you. He's like, so they throw me in the Orange County jail. Now, Orange County has a separate federal holding facility. I was always good in prison that people would take me in under their wing. All right. So this guy named Yeti, old white guy in for meth charges, he takes me in under his wing. So he starts talking to me. He's like, hey, man, you know the only time you get off on federal prison is a drug program. I was like, Yeti, I don't use drugs. He's like, well, you can find a drug problem, can't you? And I was like, I can find a drug problem.
Sure. Why not?
So they give me diesel therapy. So diesel therapy, when they're really pissed off at you, they stop at every fucking county jail along the way to tire you down. So it takes me over 2 weeks to get from Orlando back to Columbia, South Carolina. They stop at every county jail. They take you through processing, which is 4 to 6 hours. You go through the processing, hit your bunk. As soon as it hits your bunk, time to move. And
So you're a pro at getting checked in.
Oh, yeah. So it wears you down mentally, emotionally, physically, everything else. But every county jail I stop at, they ask you during processing, you have any drug problems? Yes, I do. What do you got? Alcohol, cocaine. So by the time I get back to Columbia, South Carolina, I've got a whole list of me requesting help for my drug problems, all right? I had Strom Thurmond's son as an attorney. His name is Paul Thurmond. Paid for him with illegal funds. Turns out you can't do that. So they made me drop him. They gave me a public pretender named Jimmy P. Rogers. Looked just like Lando Calrissian.
Pretender?
Yeah. Looked just like Lando Calrissian from Empire Strikes Back. So this guy, the only good thing he ever did, he stands up during the arraignment, asks the judge if the judge will order a psychological evaluation. The judge says yes. All right. So psychologist comes into county jail, 4-hour interview, halfway through, looks at me, use any type of drugs? I'm like, yeah. Well, what do you use? Cocaine? Smoke or snort? Snort? How much? An 8-ball a day. And he looks at me. He's like, that's a lot. I'm like, yeah. He's like, you have any trouble out of that? And I was like, yeah, I can't get an erection. And he looks at me. And I look at him, and I'd gotten that shit from watching the movie Boogie Nights, because that's, the end scene, Mark Wahlberg can no longer stand to attention. I'm like, that's got to be real. So we're looking at each other. He's not saying anything. And finally I break the silence. I'm like, is that right? And he's like, it could happen. Is it still going on now? And I'm like, no, it works fine now. Not that I need it to. So that makes it into my pre-sentence report. So when you're sentenced to federal prison, the prosecutor and probation office, they sit down, do an in-depth background check on you that tells the judge how much time he's supposed to give you. Makes it in my pre-sentence report. Now, I was supposed to get between 60 and 75 months. And I'd told everybody there in my cell, in my unit, I'd said, if I get any more 60 months, I am not staying. I'm going to release myself. So,
and they're like, yeah,
right. So you're allowed, when you get sentenced, you're allowed to ask the judge for a prison recommendation. And the judge will try to get you to that prison you want to go to. Well, I had family and friends look up prisons, minimum security, that didn't have a fence around them. And we had settled on Ashland, Kentucky. So what happens is, day of sentencing, prosecutor stands up screaming at this point. Screaming, he's like, Johnson has manipulated the prosecutor, the Secret Service, and he's doing it to you today, Your Honor. We insist on the upper limits of the guidelines. Judge says, I agree, 75 months. I looked at my lawyer. Can you get the drug program for me? Lawyer's like, I don't know. I'll ask. He stands up, asks. The judge says no, but I'll recommend he gets evaluated for it. I looked at my lawyer. What does that mean? Lawyer's like, you're probably not going to get it. I was like, how soon can you get me to the camp? And he's like, well, if you don't appeal pretty quickly. And my exact words were, fuck the appeal. Get me to the camp. I'll take it from there. He looks at me like I'm the biggest fucking idiot in the world. 6 weeks later, I pull in at Ashland, Kentucky. Fence. 14-foot fence, razor wire on top. I'm like, well, that's not supposed to be there. So I go in during processing, talking to the guard. Looked at the guard. I was like, are there any jobs outside of the fence? And he's like, well, you can work in the national forest. I was like, no, I'll die out there. And he's like, well, how about landscaping? I was like, I can run a weed eater. Next week, I'll walk into the landscaping office, and the guard who runs at his office, behind his desk, the entire wall is a blown-up aerial photo of the compound. So yeah, I can literally sit there, talk to the guard, and plot my escape. Now my dad starts to visit. About the third visit in, he looks at me, he's like, I've been reading about you online. I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's a lot of money you made. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, do you think you can teach somebody how to do that? Now, when I first started telling that story, and my dad, he passed away, but when I first started telling that story, I was not truthful. I said that I thought my dad was back in my life, and he wasn't. He just wanted to use me to steal money.
How does that make you feel?
Back then, I thought I was lying, okay? And over the space of several months, I changed that. And I said that, no, what I really think was happening was my dad didn't know how to communicate with me. And he was seeing me through the lens of my mom. And I chose to manipulate the man. All right? Now, the truth of the matter is...
Can't both be true?
That's the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
And it took me the last year of my dad's life, I moved him from Florida to Birmingham to live with me. And we reconciled, and I got to know my dad finally. And the truth of the matter is a little bit of both. He wanted to be able to steal money, and he wanted to be able to talk to his son. And I manipulated him too at the same time. So all that was true. And the man had $4,000 cash to his name. And I told him that, let me have that money, change of clothes, cell phone, and an ID, and I'll teach you how to do tax fraud. And I did. And so he dropped I had a job outside of the fence. And in prison camps and minimum security with federal, you get all these inmates. There are drop spots where you can drop off cell phones and McDonald's and clothing and all this other bullshit. Not supposed to have it, but people do it. So my dad dropped off the packages. And what happens is that day I had a job working. I was caretaker of the cemetery. They had an old Japanese cemetery there. So I was caretaker of the cemetery, and talked this guy into taking me up on the gator, dropping me off. And I told him I had a couple cartons of cigarettes dropped off. So he's like, yeah, can I have some cigarettes? I'm like, sure you can, man. So he takes me up there, and he's like, I'll wait here for you. And I was like, don't you worry, I've got it from here. So take off, and I made it. That was in Ashland, Kentucky. I first went to West Virginia, then backtracked from West Virginia back to Lexington, Kentucky. And the problem is the only ID my dad had was my ID. So the only place I could get at that point was a hotel. Got one I thought was on the outskirts where they wouldn't be able to find it timely. At the same time, I had contacted Dmitry Golubov. He was script in the Ukraine. He ran Carter Planet. And he was supposed to be getting me some more IDs, some more cash, and I was going to bug the fuck out. Little did I know they were under investigation too, and he wasn't going to send a fucking thing out. So about 3 weeks later, I had dyed my hair flaming red. Yeah, I was a fucking idiot. I dyed my hair red, and I was at this hotel, and the U.S. Marshals, so I say it was a motel, not a hotel, so the doors open to the outside, and I was on the second floor, and had the curtains open. This guy walks by, and as he walks by, he's looking in the window. He sees me. He stops. He knocks on the window, so he makes sure I'm looking at him, reaches in his shirt, pulls out the U.S. Marshals badge, points at the badge, points at the door, and says, "Open now." So I open the door. Once again, they put me in cuffs, and take me to the county jail. I spent 8 months in solitary confinement at that point. And what happens is I'm charged. They came in, and I had a laptop, had stolen identities again, had prepaid debit cards again. I was setting up shop again. And they seized that stuff improperly. So they couldn't use any of that against me.
Interesting.
Right? The only thing they could use was just the escape. So the day of sentencing on that bullshit, prosecutor stands up, looks at the judge. I'm in Kentucky this time. They used the exact same pre-sentence report because the escape was so quickly after the initial sentencing. So prosecutor stands up. Your Honor, we'd appreciate it if you'd take into consideration that Johnson was engaged in identity theft once again. The judge looks at him and says, no. Says, if you're going to charge him with it, you should charge him with it. Then the judge looks at me. Mr. Johnson, I have no idea why you do the things you do, but it looks like by you keeping your mouth shut right now, you're saving yourself a very serious charge. And I looked at him, I was like, yes, Your Honor. And he's like, he starts going through the PSR. He's like, it also looks like before you got involved with all these drugs, you were a very good citizen. And I was like, yes, Your Honor. So he was like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sentence you to 15 months for the escape. I was like, okay. He's like, I'm also going to order the drug program for you. I was like, yes, Your Honor. So what that actually means is the drug program gives you a year off, and it gives you 6 months halfway house.
So you got out a month earlier.
I got out 3 months earlier than I would have without the escape. Wow. But the drug program, that's the weird thing about this, is the drug program was one of the most beneficial things that could have ever happened to me, because it's not about rehab on drugs. It's about cognitive behavioral therapy, teaching you that your thoughts determine your feelings, feelings determine your actions, change your thought process, the actions change at the end of the day. And I took to that.
Well, I think that's a great place to end.
Not too bad.
Not too bad. But I do think this is worth a follow-up at some point.
I'd love to.
Maybe next season you can come on down if
I'd
you
love
got
to,
something
absolutely.
else going on.
I love Austin as it is.
That's a great place, right?
Yeah.
Well, Brett, thank you so much for doing this, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate it,
Yeah.
truly.